What if the world we know is only a fragment, an echo that survived the melting of a greater truth? Somewhere beneath the thick, unbroken veil of Antarctic ice, whispers of another time sleep in perfect silence. There are maps, centuries old, that draw coastlines beneath the frozen crust. Coastlines no human eye has seen for millions of years. Who drew them? From what memory or what civilization erased before our own? They say ice forgets nothing, that every flake that falls carries a trace of the world it buried. And if that is true, then Antarctica is not merely a desert of frost. It is a library of lost time, its pages sealed in cold light, waiting for us to remember. So take a breath and let the world grow quiet. Tonight, we drift to the edge of the world, to the forbidden continent that may hold Earth's true history. Take a moment to like this video and subscribe, only if you truly enjoy stories that drift between dream and history. And if you're still awake, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. They called it the White Silence long before the age of exploration, long before compasses spun wild near the pole, before planes vanished into static skies. Antarctica, to those who had never seen it, was a symbol rather than a place. In the old world, it was the edge of the divine map, the final margin where creation met the unknown. But for the few who dared to look closer, it was not silence they found. It was memory. In 1513, an Ottoman admiral named Piri Reis drew a map on gazelle skin, a work that would later confound scholars for centuries. It depicted parts of the African coast, South America, and the northern shoreline of a vast landmass below them, drawn not as frozen, but green, with rivers, valleys, and mountains. When the map was rediscovered in 1929 at Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, experts from the US, Navy Hydrographic Office, confirmed something strange. The contours of that hidden continent aligned precisely with the subglacial coastline of Antarctica, as revealed by 20th century seismic surveys. How could a 16th century mapmaker know the shape of a continent buried beneath miles of ice? Some dismissed it as coincidence, others as speculation. But the question lingered, haunting historians and cartographers alike. Piri Reis himself claimed he compiled his map from 20 charts and mapae mundi, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, others from the ancient kings of the sea. What were those maps? Who were those ancient kings? And if the ice had truly buried the land for millions of years, how could any civilization have seen it unveiled? The official story tells us that Antarctica has been covered by ice for at least 34 million years since the Oligocene epoch. Yet, beneath that certainty, anomalies pile like buried fossils. In 1949, during Operation High Jump, a US Navy expedition led by Admiral Richard E. Byrd, scientists reported areas where the temperature was unusually mild, where lakes of unfrozen water steamed beneath the snow. Byrd himself would later speak cryptically of a land beyond the pole, a vast expanse bigger than the United States, rich in resources and mystery. His words were later dismissed as poetic exaggeration. But those who have studied his diaries, particularly the fragments said to be from his private logs, suggest something more. A journey not only into a geographical frontier, but into a forbidden realm of memory, one that governments might have wished to conceal. There are clues scattered like fragments of a broken lens, ancient myths from disparate cultures, Greek, Hindu, Norse, Mayan, all speak of a world at the southern edge, a land of gods banished or asleep beneath the cold. The Greeks called it Antarcticos, the opposite of the north, not as an empty wasteland but as a counterbalance, a mirror to life itself. In some versions of Hindu cosmology, the southern world was Patala, an underworld realm inhabited by the Nagas, serpent beings who lived in radiant cities beneath the surface. To the Norse it was Niflheim, the land of mist and eternal ice, where the roots of the world tree plunged into hidden water. Across oceans and epochs, the metaphors align. Beneath the ice lies the beginning, not the end. When the first seismic readings were taken in the 1950s, revealing mountain ranges beneath the ice, now known as the Gambutsev Mountains, scientists were astonished. They were as large as the Alps, yet entirely invisible to human eyes. Their peaks, perfectly preserved beneath the frozen shell, suggested that the continent had once been temperate, possibly forested, Some even speculated that its last ice-free period could have occurred as recently as 6,000 years ago, a blink in geological time and dangerously close to the dawn of recorded human history. If that is true, then the maps like Piri Reis's may not be relics of imagination, but echoes of a world that existed before the freeze, before the axis tilt or the cosmic event that buried it. And if humanity's memory of such a place survived through myths, through oral tradition, through strange symbols carved on temple stones from Egypt to Bolivia, then perhaps Antarctica was not forgotten at all. Perhaps it was deliberately erased. In 1957, the International Geophysical Year brought dozens of nations to the frozen continent for coordinated scientific study. Less than 2 years later, in 1959, the Antarctic Treaty was signed, banning all military activity, territorial claims, and most forms of resource exploration. It was hailed as a triumph of international cooperation, but for some, it felt like a lock placed on a door no one was allowed to open again. Why such sudden unity over a desolate, uninhabited wasteland? Why was the only continent on Earth forbidden to ordinary citizens, its skies restricted, its secrets sealed under layers of protocol and ice? The official answer was protection, preservation of the environment, prevention of conflict. Yet for those who read between lines, the timing was uncanny. The treaty was signed just as Cold War powers raced to probe beneath the ice, to drill, to map, to discover. Then, silence. The continent became a blank spot again, a void in the map of human curiosity. Some researchers, like Charles Hapgood, dared to challenge the narrative. In his book Maps of the Ancient Sea Kings, Hapgood proposed that Earth's crust might have shifted, displacing entire continents and changing climates in a geological instant. Einstein himself reviewed Hapgood's manuscript, calling the idea interesting and worthy of consideration. If crustal displacement occurred, Antarctica might once have lain thousands of miles north, in a temperate zone, lush, habitable, alive. When the shift came, it froze overnight, sealing not only forests and rivers, but perhaps the remains of an earlier humanity, or something older still. Imagine, then, that beneath the ice lie cities entombed like insects in amber, structures eroded but not destroyed, libraries fossilized in crystal, bones of creatures whose names we've forgotten. Could the whispers of ancient kings of the sea be fragments of that memory? Could Piri Reis's sources have been survivors of a cataclysm, their maps inherited from a world swallowed by the cold? No one can say. The data is partial, the evidence fragmented, the ice too thick to yield its secrets freely. But as satellites now scan the continent with radar that can see through ice, new shapes emerge, patterns, anomalies, angles that do not belong to nature. Each one raises another question, another haunting possibility, and so the white silence remains. Not empty, but listening. Not barren, but remembering. And perhaps, somewhere beneath those miles of frozen time, the first chapter of human history still waits to be found. When explorers first reached the Antarctic coast in the early 20th century, they described the landscape as a white cathedral, vast, reverent, almost sentient in its stillness. Yet even then, rumours swirled around what lay hidden below. Scientists spoke of strange magnetic anomalies, radio distortions, compasses that trembled as if sensing something alive beneath the crust. By 1947, as Admiral Byrd led Operation High Jump, those rumours would ignite into something more, a whisper that Antarctica was not merely a continent, but a vault. The official purpose of Operation High Jump was practical, to test military survival in polar conditions and map the frozen terrain. But declassified documents later revealed a far grander scale: 13 ships, 33 aircraft, and nearly 5,000 men. Such a force seemed excessive for a scientific mission. Some claimed it was a reconnaissance effort to locate potential bases. Others said it was to investigate the mysterious sightings of German submarines that had vanished after World War II. Even more controversial were the accounts that followed. Stories of warm zones, of strange craft in the sky, and of a sudden, unexplained retreat. In later years, the myth grew that Byrd's expedition had encountered something unexpected, perhaps not human. His alleged missing diary, first circulated in the 1990s, described a flight beyond the pole into a lush inner world lit by an internal sun, where advanced beings warned him of humanity's destructive path. Most historians dismiss it as fabrication, yet the persistence of the story, the need to believe in an Antarctic Eden, speaks to a deeper intuition that something once thrived beneath the ice. Long before Byrd, ancient cultures seemed to know of a hidden southern land. The Orontius Phineus map, drawn in 1531, depicted Antarctica remarkably free of ice, complete with mountain ranges and rivers in roughly accurate proportions. When the US Air Force compared it to modern radar imaging in the 1960s, the similarities were undeniable. This was not the fantasy of an armchair cartographer. It was a relic of a lost geographical memory. Who carried that memory forward across millennia of darkness? Some have looked to the legends of Atlantis, not as a single island, but as a memory of many lost lands swallowed by the shifting seas. Plato's dialogues tell of a civilization beyond the Pillars of Hercules, destroyed in a single night of fire and flood. Yet what if the true direction was not west but south? What if the catastrophe that ended Atlantis was the same that sealed Antarctica beneath the ice? Geological studies confirm that around 12,000 years ago, the end of the Pleistocene, a rapid climate shift occurred, melting glaciers, raising sea levels and altering continents. In the younger Dryas period, temperatures plunged abruptly again, as if the planet itself had convulsed. Some scholars, like Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock, suggest that a comet impact triggered this chaos, obliterating advanced prehistoric cultures that left behind only scattered hints. Alignments, symbols, impossible architecture. Across the globe, traces of such impossible memory surface. In the Andes, the megalithic fortress of Sacsayhuaman features interlocking stones so precisely cut they seem moulded like clay. On the Giza Plateau, the erosion patterns on the Sphinx's body suggest heavy rainfall thousands of years before Egypt's recorded history. An age when the Sahara was lush and green. Could these remnants belong to the same forgotten epoch, the one that ended in ice? Modern Antarctica hides similar enigmas. Beneath the 2-mile-thick ice sheet lies Lake Vostok, sealed for at least 15 million years. When Russian scientists drilled into it in 2012, they discovered traces of microbial life unlike anything known on the surface. Some even speculated the existence of multicellular organisms, though such claims were swiftly censored or clarified. The lake's ecosystem, untouched by sunlight, might represent a biosphere frozen in time, or something entirely alien to our evolutionary lineage. What if the life trapped there was not primitive, but relics of a vanished complexity? Further west, satellite images from 2016 showed curious formations near the Prince Charles Mountains, 3 symmetrical ridges protruding from the snow, resembling pyramids. Geologists argue they are natural nunataks, the exposed peaks of buried mountains. Yet the geometry seems deliberate, unsettlingly so. Their angles echo those of Giza, Teotihuacan, and other sacred alignments spread across continents as though a single mind had once designed Earth's sacred geography. Coincidence or continuity? Perhaps the strangest evidence lies in the ice itself. Core samples extracted from the continent show traces of pollen, diatoms, and tropical microorganisms. Around 400,000 years ago, the region was warm enough to sustain forests, rivers, and complex ecosystems. Even more puzzling are isotopic irregularities, chemical signatures that suggest abrupt heating events, as though massive energy had struck the pole, melting it briefly before freezing again. Could such events explain the ancient maps, drawn during brief windows when the continent was exposed, its secret revealed before vanishing once more? The deeper question is not whether such anomalies exist. They do, but why they unsettle us so deeply. To imagine Antarctica as once temperate is to question the very stability of Earth's history, the slow, predictable rhythm we've been taught. If civilizations have risen and fallen before recorded time, if continents have shifted overnight, if memory itself can be buried under ice, then what else have we inherited without understanding? Some philosophers have called Antarctica the mirror of amnesia, a place where humanity projects its forgotten self. In mythic terms, it is the sleeping giant, the frozen god awaiting reawakening. The Greeks spoke of Kronos, chained beneath the earth, the Gnostics of the demiurge, crafting illusions to keep the spirit bound. Perhaps Antarctica plays that role in our collective psyche, a landscape so inaccessible that it becomes the repository of all that must remain hidden. And yet science, in its quiet persistence, keeps approaching the threshold. New radar scans reveal networks of subglacial lakes connected by channels, vast liquid arteries flowing under the ice, stretching for hundreds of kilometers. Some of these channels correspond eerily to river systems depicted on the Peary Race and Orontius maps. If those rivers truly existed, they suggest a time when the continent breathed, when its waters ran free. Could the remnants of human or pre-human activity still rest along those long-buried banks? The data is mounting, but meaning slips through the cracks. Each discovery deepens the mystery rather than dissolving it. Every probe, every satellite pass, every whisper of radar only seems to confirm the feeling that Antarctica is not a blank, but a palimpsest, rewritten again and again until only traces remain. And so, we return to the question that began in ink on a 16th century map. Who remembered the unremembered world? Was it a civilization erased by ice, or something older that watched from above, tracing the continents before human eyes ever saw them? Beneath the white cathedral, beneath the silence that is not silence, something waits, patient, ancient, untouched, and perhaps the ice does not hide it out of cruelty, but mercy. Every great silence conceals a wound, and every wound remembers. Antarctica's quiet is not the stillness of death, it is the stillness of waiting. For centuries, explorers have spoken of a sense of presence there, as if the land itself was aware of being watched, and perhaps it is. The continent is not merely a mass of ice, it is a mirror of the planet's forgotten consciousness, a geological memory pressed into crystal. Beneath its frozen layers, time does not pass, it collects. When scientists first began drilling deep core samples in the late 20th century, they expected to find ice and dust. What they found instead were stories. Layer upon layer, year upon year, the ice preserved traces of volcanic eruptions, meteor impacts, and even distant forest pollen. Each ring was a heartbeat of the planet, a whisper from an earlier world. Some cores reach back 800,000 years, revealing atmospheric compositions that spoke of catastrophic shifts, sudden spikes in carbon, abrupt plunges in temperature. Something, again and again, reset the rhythm. The question was not just how the ice formed, but what it remembered. Among the deepest samples were microscopic spheres of metallic origin, tiny particles not native to any known meteorite. Their isotopic composition suggested artificial refinement. Some scientists speculated industrial pollution carried on wind currents. But how could such traces exist in strata dating back 500,000 years, long before human industry? The discovery was quietly archived, never officially explained. Yet it fit a pattern seen elsewhere on Earth. Evidence of sophistication out of place, anachronistic fragments scattered through deep time. In 1978, the Soviet Union launched a series of secretive expeditions to Antarctica under the pretext of geological study. Decades later, after the fall of the USSR, fragments of their reports surfaced. References to unusual subglacial magnetic formations, vast circular regions where instruments failed or gave conflicting readings. Some of those coordinates, when plotted, coincided with the buried mountain ranges beneath Queen Maud Land. Conspiracy theorists would later call them entrances, but perhaps they were something more subtle. Resonant zones, regions where the crust's memory vibrated with something ancient, something that might not have been entirely geological. One Russian geophysicist, Dr. Nikolai Koryagin, described it in his private notes as a hum beneath silence. He claimed that when seismic waves were fired into certain regions of the ice, they returned patterns that were neither natural echo nor random noise. They were rhythmic, like coded pulses. It is as if, he wrote, the Earth were dreaming in intervals. His findings were never published. Koryagin vanished during the following expedition, his final radio transmission cut short by interference. Officially, he fell into a crevasse. Unofficially, he joined the long list of those who had looked too deep, and yet, the hum remains. Modern satellites, equipped with ice-penetrating radar and electromagnetic sensors, have registered low-frequency oscillations in certain regions of the continent. Regular, sustained, almost biological in pattern. Some attribute them to the movement of subglacial water, others whisper of something larger, a pulse. The Earth, they say, still remembers what was once alive beneath that shell, but alive in what sense? Perhaps not organic, perhaps something else, architectural, harmonic. In 2018, a research team from the British Antarctic Survey recorded infrasonic vibrations beneath Lake Vostok that mirrored the resonant frequencies of human-built chambers, such as pyramids or temples. The data was never released in full. The acoustic reflections, said one anonymous source, were not chaotic, they were organised. It's a small phrase, easily dismissed, yet it evokes a terrifying possibility that what lies below was built to endure the ages, to outlast even extinction. In many traditions, there is a myth of the frozen hall, a sanctuary of the gods hidden in ice, waiting for the world to grow quiet again. The Tibetan Kangri Chu, the Norse Gjöll Bridge, the Mayan House of Cold Mist. Each points to a realm sealed from time, reachable only when the sun stands still. Could these myths have encoded not merely spiritual metaphors, but geographical memory? Could ancient travellers, those kings of the sea, Peary Race mentioned, have known of a polar land that once bore cities of light before the world tilted and froze? If we imagine the Earth as an organism, then Antarctica is its scar tissue, a place of healing, not decay, its crust thicker than anywhere else, its gravity feels uneven, as though something immense once pressed upon it and left an impression. Satellite gravimetry from NASA's GRACE mission revealed anomalies so vast they defy easy classification. Dense, circular regions beneath the ice, extending for hundreds of kilometers. Some scientists interpret them as remnants of asteroid impacts, others, more quietly, as structures, megalithic, geometric, and too precise for chance. And if they are structures, then what purpose could they serve? To watch, to remember, or to wait? The philosopher Mircea Eliade once wrote that sacred spaces do not vanish. They hide. They sink beneath the profane world, awaiting rediscovery when humanity is ready to see again. Antarctica may be the last and greatest of such sanctuaries. Its inaccessibility is not merely physical, but symbolic, a veil drawn between what we think we know and what the planet has not yet permitted us to recall. Even now, international protocols restrict where scientists may drill, where cameras may record. Entire zones are marked as protected ecosystems, though nothing lives there. Others are deemed magnetically sensitive. Why, one wonders, would magnetism require secrecy? Perhaps the answer lies in memory itself. Human history has always been rewritten by those who control its maps, emperors, priests, conquerors. But the Earth's memory cannot be rewritten, only buried. And when ice becomes the ink of time, the pages can only stay closed for so long. Every so often, the ice offers a sign. A meteorite streaks across the white horizon, embedding itself in the frozen crust like punctuation. A fissure opens, revealing rock untouched for millions of years. Sometimes the wind carries a sound that is not wind, a low, continuous note like the echo of something immense turning beneath the surface. The scientists call it ice-quake resonance. But to those who have heard it, it sounds less like cracking and more like breathing. It is said that silence is not the absence of sound, but the presence of everything waiting to be heard. And if that is true, then Antarctica may be the oldest voice of all, speaking in frequencies we have forgotten how to understand. So perhaps when Admiral Byrd spoke of a land beyond the pole, the centre of the great unknown, he was not describing geography at all. Perhaps he was describing the memory of Earth itself, still whispering beneath the frost, reminding us that we have not yet reached the edge. We have only forgotten where the beginning was. There is a peculiar loneliness in imagining a continent that watches but cannot speak. Antarctica feels like the last untouched mirror of the Earth, reflecting not just the sky above it, but all the epochs it has buried. Every gust of wind there moves as if across an ancient face, eroding nothing, revealing nothing, only whispering the same unanswered question. What memory sleeps beneath the ice? In 1962, a small team from the British Antarctic Survey discovered something that would never appear in official summaries. While conducting geomagnetic mapping near Coates Land, they detected a vast circular magnetic anomaly spanning nearly 300 kilometres in diameter. Instruments faltered, compasses spun erratically. The readings pointed towards something dense and metallic deep below the surface, too symmetrical to be natural. They called it the Wilkes Land anomaly. For decades it would be explained away as a possible asteroid impact site, but the depth, more than 800 metres beneath the ice, suggested another possibility, that something was buried intentionally. When satellites later confirmed the anomaly's shape, a circular depression nearly as large as the state of Ohio, whispers began again. A base, a ruin, a vault. Some researchers speculated that it could be the remains of an ancient civilization's technological heart, buried by a catastrophe or an intentional act of concealment. Others, more cautious, suggested it was the scar of a prehistoric impact that triggered the last global flood, the one remembered in myths from every corner of the world. The difference between these two possibilities, a ruin or an impact, is only a question of intent. One assumes accident, the other assumes memory. Yet the deeper the science dug, the more questions surfaced. The ice above Wilkes Land preserves atmospheric gases trapped for millennia, and within them, anomalous traces of xenon isotopes, the kind typically found after nuclear reactions. How could such signatures exist in ice hundreds of thousands of years old? No human technology could have caused it then, unless, of course, human history began far earlier than we imagine, or something other than human shaped this world once before. It is tempting to dismiss such thoughts as myth-making, to hide them beneath the comfort of scientific uncertainty. But uncertainty has always been the doorway to revelation. In 1973, during an American expedition known as Deep Freeze, military reconnaissance flights captured high-resolution radar data over that same region. The images were classified. A few frames, declassified decades later, showed something disquieting: angular formations beneath the ice, casting faint shadows through the frozen crust. Engineers called them echo distortions. Artists called them architecture. One might expect such mysteries to ignite global curiosity, yet the opposite occurred. Access to the region tightened. Permits became nearly impossible to obtain. Satellite imagery in those coordinates was blurred or withheld. A quiet embargo descended over the world's most uninhabited land. Why? If nothing is there, why must it remain unseen? It is worth remembering that secrecy itself can be a form of preservation. Not all truths are meant to be touched. Not all memories should thaw. There are old traditions in Sumerian, Egyptian and Vedic texts that describe a hidden land beneath the south, a sacred refuge of knowledge after a great deluge. The Egyptian Book of the Dead speaks of the Isle of the White Crown, a place of rebirth at the end of the world, where the gods retreated when their temples fell. The Sanskrit Mahabharata mentions Atala, a shining underworld at the southern pole ruled by serpent sages who taught mankind the arts of sound and metal, before vanishing into sleep. Could these fragments be the echo of Antarctica before its silence, before the sea rose, before the ice sealed its breath? There is one fragment of memory that still refuses to fade: the myths of those who came from the south. Polynesian oral traditions tell of the Kiwa lineage, ancestors who sailed from a land of endless light to the warmer islands long before the sea changed. The Maori call it Tepo, the long night where creation began. Some anthropologists interpret these as symbolic. Others find linguistic parallels with ancient Andean terms for the cold gods. How far could memory travel across the ocean, carried by those who fled a dying world? Modern science, too, has begun to uncover uncomfortable alignments. Fossilized wood found deep beneath the transantarctic mountains indicates that vast forests once flourished there, with trees adapted to polar light cycles. Traces of freshwater diatoms, species found nowhere else on Earth, have been discovered in ice cores just 2 kilometers below the surface. The most puzzling part: these microorganisms appear to have been alive less than 10,000 years ago. That means some part of the continent thawed, recently and suddenly. A geological accident, perhaps. But what if it wasn't? What if the freeze and thaw of Antarctica are part of a cycle not merely climatic, but cosmic? Ancient texts from Mesopotamia describe periodic reversals of the sun, epochs when the poles shifted and the world was remade. Plato spoke of the same in the Timaeus. The earth periodically turns upon itself, resetting civilization each time. When such a shift occurs, land rises and sinks, climates invert, and memory, human or otherwise, is erased. If this is true, then Antarctica's silence is not the silence of a grave, but the pause between breaths. The continent becomes less a tomb than a chrysalis, a cocoon holding the genetic memory of the planet's earlier self. Perhaps that is why so many myths speak of God sleeping beneath the ice, waiting for the world to turn upright again. And if those gods were not divine but ancient intelligences, human or otherwise, then what might happen when the ice finally yields? Already glaciers retreat faster than any model predicts. Satellite imagery from 2023 shows fissures in regions once thought immovable, channels opening toward the bedrock. Something below is warming. Some scientists blame geothermal activity, volcanic plumes beneath the crust. Others suspect deep-seated magnetic anomalies releasing heat. Either way, the ice is thinning, and what it hides will not remain hidden forever. There is a strange symmetry to it all. Humanity, at its technological peak, is now probing the universe for origins, sending telescopes to the edges of time, while beneath its own feet lies an archive of forgotten beginnings. What if the key to our future does not lie in the stars, but in the frozen mirror below us? What if the truth of who we are has been buried, not lost? Somewhere under layers of ancient snow lies the last chapter of the first civilization, or the first chapter of the next. The question is not whether we will find it, but whether we will recognize it when we do. Because what if the ice does not melt by accident? What if it is being allowed to melt, slowly, deliberately, by a planet that remembers more than we dare to? The deeper one descends into the study of Antarctica, the more it begins to resemble a paradox, a place of perfect absence that overflows with presence. The further scientists drill, the less they understand what they are touching. Each sample, each radar scan, each anomaly seems to lead away from certainty, as if the continent itself guards its truth with layers of misdirection. Perhaps that is why so many who have gone there return with eyes that no longer look the same. They speak of strange lights beneath the horizon, of auroras that seem to pulse in patterns, of dreams that feel like memories not their own. In 1982, a joint Soviet-American research team installed experimental seismic detectors along the Queen Alexandra Range. The project was meant to test cross-hemispheric wave propagation through the Earth's mantle. But what they recorded was unexpected. Artificial harmonic frequencies emanating from beneath the ice. Tones that repeated at precise mathematical intervals. The data resembled coded transmission rather than natural vibration. "The Earth," one of the researchers wrote in a private memo, "is singing, but we have forgotten the language." The information was classified shortly after, and most of the original tapes are said to have vanished during the collapse of the Soviet Union. That same year, the European Space Agency's early satellite imagery revealed faint geometric shadows beneath the Dronning-Maud region, hexagonal formations spanning several miles. Scientists dismissed them as radar artifacts, yet subsequent scans produced similar outlines. The symmetry was too exact, the repetition too deliberate. A small number of independent researchers, among them physicist Valery Uvarov, suggested that these might be remnants of an ancient energy grid, structures designed to stabilize planetary resonance. He called them geoacoustic chambers, likening them to the standing wave resonators found in the Great Pyramid of Giza. Was it possible that what we call civilization once extended to the ends of the Earth, unified not by empire but by geometry? Such questions make traditional historians uneasy. They prefer boundaries, eras, epochs, names. Yet Antarctica laughs at chronology. Its ice preserves moments out of sequence. A seed from 400,000 years ago, a bubble of air from 50,000, a dust grain from 12,000. In that deep time, the distinction between myth and memory dissolves. It is not that the past is gone, but that it is layered beneath our feet, frozen into a library written in pressure and silence. There are rumours that during the 1990s certain discoveries within this frozen library altered the course of scientific access. A US expedition operating near the South Pole, nominally studying meteorites, reportedly encountered a void zone, a region of electromagnetic interference that disabled instruments and communications. When their aircraft finally returned, its fuselage bore scorch-like patterns not of heat, but magnetism. The report was buried under routine debriefing paperwork, but whispers persisted that something artificial had been found within the bedrock itself, something emitting frequencies. It was not the first time such stories surfaced. In the 1950s, British meteorologist Sir Douglas Mawson wrote of hearing a subterranean hum near the coastal ice cliffs, low, rhythmic, almost musical. He likened it to a cathedral organ heard from beneath the floor. Decades later, acoustic researchers confirmed that low-frequency vibrations do permeate the Antarctic ice, resonating through the continental shelf like slow thunder. Some are glacial quakes, others no one can explain. The earth hums, as if reciting the remnants of an older prayer. Could it be that what we perceive as geological noise is actually the residue of lost technology? Machines that no longer serve their builders, but continue their function out of inertia? There is a strange poetry to the idea that beneath the silence the first engineers of Earth still dream, their creations humming through the ages, buried in frost but not forgotten. And then there are the warm zones. Hidden pockets of geothermal activity have been detected beneath the ice, creating isolated ecosystems where liquid water and microbial life persist. In 2019, researchers studying one such cavity beneath the Thwaites Glacier reported biological markers inconsistent with any known lineage. The cells were not frozen relics. They were alive, adapting, dividing slowly under pressures unimaginable. When news of the find reached the surface, it was retracted within days as contamination. But the samples disappeared before any independent verification could occur. Some biologists have privately proposed a radical theory that these subterranean biomes are not merely survivors of ancient life, but descendants of an entirely different branch of evolution, one that may have originated when Antarctica was still free of ice. If so, then the continent is not just the tomb of a lost world, it is the cradle of another. Consider this. Every ancient mythology, from the Hopi to the Hindu, speaks of a hidden seed race, preserved underground during the last cataclysm. The Hopi call them the Ant People, beings who sheltered humanity beneath the earth during the Great Flood. The Hindu Puranas speak of Patala, luminous cities below the southern world. Could these myths be fragmented recollections of the same event, the same refuge beneath the Antarctic crust, preserved not in stone but in ice? Perhaps that is why so many expeditions end in silence. Some say the continent itself resists intrusion, as if aware of what it guards. The storms there arise without warning, walls of wind that can erase footprints within seconds. GPS fails, machines freeze, communications vanish into static. It is as if the land enforces its own boundaries, permitting only glimpses, never revelation. Philosophers have long argued that what is hidden remains hidden for a reason. The German mystic Jakob Böhme once wrote that God placed knowledge in the depths so that only those who seek with humility may find it. Antarctica is such a depth. It offers no easy answers, only questions that reflect the seeker's own shadow. The more you look for the beginning, the more you sense that the beginning is looking back. And if the ice were to melt completely, if the glaciers broke and the bedrock emerged, what would rise from the white silence? Would we find ruins, bones, or reflections of ourselves from a time before time? Perhaps the danger is not what lies hidden, but what it will mean to remember. For if Antarctica does hold Earth's true history, then our entire chronology, our sense of progress, of singular human ascent, would collapse like frost beneath the sun. We would have to accept that we are not the first, that the world has dreamed itself awake many times before, and maybe that is why the ice remains, to protect us from remembering too soon. They say that the closer one comes to the pole, the thinner the veil grows. The air feels too still, the light too white, as if reality itself is being washed of colour, preparing to reveal what lies beneath. For those who have spent long seasons in Antarctica, there is a sensation difficult to describe, not isolation, but awareness, as though the ice listens. Some speak of dreams that repeat themselves, of voices calling through the wind, of the uncanny feeling that the landscape remembers your name. Perhaps this is not superstition, but resonance, our own biology responding to something ancient and unspoken that vibrates beneath the ice. In the winter of 1995, a seismic study conducted near the Vostok station recorded something impossible. Beneath nearly 4 kilometers of ice, researchers detected a perfect acoustic reflection, smooth, dense, metallic. It was first thought to be a geological layer, but when the data was analysed, the structure appeared to be polygonal, 12 sides, evenly distributed, forming what one geophysicist described as a buried dodecagon. The shape mirrored sacred geometries found in ancient temples, from Angkor to Teotihuacan. The report never reached publication. The scientist who authored it later took a position in private industry and refused all interviews. What could such symmetry mean, buried so deep that no human hand could have carved it? Was it natural coincidence, or evidence of design on a planetary scale? The mystery deepened when, just years later, radar imaging confirmed multiple layers of geometric anomalies beneath the central ice sheet, each aligned with faint magnetic distortions. Whatever their nature, they did not appear random. Some researchers began to whisper of planetary architecture, the possibility that Earth itself carries imprints of an intelligent order predating human civilization. And in that quiet speculation, Antarctica became more than geography. It became the keystone of an invisible design. One theory, long dismissed yet persistently resurfacing, connects these patterns to the lost continent of Lemuria, or Mu, civilization said to have vanished into the sea before history began. Early 20th century mystics like James Churchward and later writers such as Helena Blavatsky spoke of a primordial culture that understood the harmonics of Earth's grid, points of energy that connected sacred sites across the globe. If one were to map these points, the pyramids of Giza, Machu Picchu, Stonehenge, Easter Island, they would form lines converging in the South Pole's vicinity. Coincidence, perhaps. But even skeptics cannot explain the near-perfect mathematical symmetry of these alignments. The ancient Hindu texts refer to a cosmic architecture called Vastu Purusha Mandala, a geometric pattern believed to mirror the structure of the universe itself. In this design, the world is divided into squares and circles, all centered around an unseen core. Could Antarctica be that core, a physical manifestation of an ancient cosmogram, the axis mundi around which civilizations built their myths of order and chaos? By the end of the 20th century, as digital imaging improved, the secrets of the ice began to flicker into view, only to vanish again under the cloak of classification. In 2002, a joint NASA-ESA mission known as IceSat detected faint linear ridges beneath the East Antarctic Plateau. The ridges formed a vast hexagonal pattern, too regular to be natural yet too immense to belong to any known structure. Analysts compared it to the layout of megalithic sites but scaled up thousands of times. Within months, the dataset was quietly removed from public archives. Officially, it was due to instrumental noise. But noise rarely arranges itself into harmony. If these patterns are real, they suggest that Antarctica may not be the grave of civilization. It may be its blueprint. A forgotten archive in ice, recording the geometry of an earlier world that understood the planet not as rock and water, but as resonance. Across mythologies, the idea of a white world or crystal land recurs, the abode of the gods before the fall. The Mayan Popol Vuh speaks of a shining floor that cracked and fell into shadow. The Egyptian priests of Heliopolis referred to Tanita, the god's land, said to have sunk in the south when the axis of the sky shifted. Even Plato's Timaeus hints at a polar catastrophe that tilted the chariot of the world. Could all these stories point not to poetic metaphor, but to the same event, the freezing of a once luminous land that stood at the centre of a planetary network? Some modern physicists have begun to entertain similar notions, though through the language of field dynamics rather than myth. The Earth's magnetic poles, they note, have flipped dozens of times in geological history, with abrupt changes capable of destabilizing climates and redistributing continents. A rapid pole shift could turn temperate forests into wastelands of ice, preserving cities like insects trapped in amber. If one occurred 12,000 years ago, the same period many cultures remember as the Great Flood, Antarctica could easily have shifted from paradise to prison in a single epical moment. The question, then, is whether the ice merely buried what was, or preserved it for when we are ready to understand. It is telling that the 1959 Antarctic Treaty remains one of the few international agreements never broken by war, greed, or conquest. Nations that disagree on everything else still guard this frozen land as sacred. Some see that as noble restraint. Others see it as silent guardianship, an unspoken pact not to disturb what sleeps below. Could it be that governments, for all their denials, know there is something down there that transcends politics, something that once touched the human story before erasing itself from it? Every few years, whispers surface, of drilling teams that encountered warm chambers filled with methane bubbles and structures that could not be explained. Of satellite operators who saw strange luminous glows beneath the ice sheet before their feeds were cut. Of scientists evacuated suddenly for medical reasons they could not later recall. It is easy to dismiss such tales as conspiracy, yet even the dismissals feel rehearsed, as if meant not to convince but to reassure. Maybe reassurance is what humanity craves most, that the unknown will stay unknown a little longer. Still, the ice moves. The glaciers crawl northward inch by inch, and each year satellites catch glimpses of what was once hidden. Smooth plains where ice should be jagged, subglacial ridges forming perfect arcs, thermal signatures hinting at heat sources far below the crust. The continent seems alive, almost restless, as though something beneath it has begun to stir. What would it mean if the world's oldest mystery is not about the past but the future? If the awakening of Antarctica is not a geological event, but the re-emergence of a memory that belongs to the planet itself? Perhaps we are not explorers uncovering a frozen land. Perhaps we are witnesses to the slow reappearance of the Earth's own mind, a consciousness that never truly left, only went dormant when the last sun set over a world that was not yet ours. And as the white horizon glows faintly through the polar night, we may sense it, that the silence is thinning, that the veil is cracking, and that the first echoes of what lies below are rising once more like breath after a long sleep. There are moments when silence feels heavier than sound, when stillness itself begins to hum. In Antarctica, that hum never truly stops. It travels through the ground like a heartbeat, deep and patient, reverberating through layers of ice older than civilization. Scientists call it cryoseismic resonance, the sound of glaciers grinding against bedrock. But to those who have stood there, alone, at the edge of the world, it feels like something else entirely. It feels like the planet remembering. When the first ice cores from Dome C were analysed in the early 2000s, they revealed more than climate data. Within microscopic air bubbles, trapped for over 700,000 years, researchers detected traces of methane spikes and chemical markers consistent with massive biomass burn events. Yet no volcanic activity could explain them. Some hypothesized a global wildfire. Others whispered of technological signatures, ancient industry erased by glacial time. Most papers chose safer language, unknown cause. But even that phrase felt like an echo of something we have forgotten how to name. For years, the public narrative remained simple. Antarctica is lifeless, static, unchanging. Yet the data suggests the opposite. The continent breathes. Beneath its frozen crust lies a network of rivers and lakes that shift, merge, and disappear. Some move with rhythm, pulsing as though responding to tides unseen. Satellite radar has even detected regions where the ice rises and falls in cycles too regular to be geological. Every 12 hours, every 24, as if in sync with some deeper planetary mechanism. These are not metaphors. They are measurements. In 2018, a team from the University of Edinburgh released findings that startled even their peers. Radar scans revealed a circular structure nearly 50 kilometers wide beneath the Antarctic Peninsula, buried under ice thicker than any skyscraper is tall. The formation's density, magnetic alignment, and surrounding fissures match no known natural process. Privately, one researcher described it as a dome. The study was quickly withdrawn. Its data vanished from official archives within weeks, cited as instrument calibration errors. But digital footprints remain, fragments mirrored on servers too distant to recall. Whispers followed that the dome corresponded to coordinates found in an obscure Nazi-era document from 1943 titled Neue Schwabenland Expeditionsbericht. During the Second World War, Germany had sent ships south to claim territory in Queen Maud Land, where they reportedly discovered ice-free valleys and geothermal oases. Mainstream historians dismiss such reports as propaganda, Yet eyewitness accounts persist from crew members who claim to have seen mountains without snow and warm rain. Were these illusions born of exhaustion, or glimpses of something the ice had not yet fully reclaimed? Decades later, American and Russian missions returned to similar coordinates under the guise of geological surveys. They found the region riddled with magnetic distortions and subterranean heat plumes, rising from depths unaccounted for by volcanism. The findings were classified. Some of those scientists, those who later spoke anonymously, claimed that what they encountered beneath the ice did not behave like rock. We are trained to see the world as stable, continents, oceans, epochs. But what if that stability is only an illusion maintained by habit? What if Antarctica is not the end of the world, but its beginning? The point from which all land, all life, all memory unfolded before the Earth shifted and the axis rewrote its map. Ancient traditions speak of just such a transformation. The Hopi tell of the world turned upside down, the Aztecs of the sun that fell into darkness. In Hindu cosmology, the poles are inverted in every new cycle of creation, erasing all memory before the next dawn. Perhaps that is why the ice feels sacred. It is not simply frozen water. It is the fossil of time itself, holding within it the breath of earlier suns. When a scientist touches an ice core, they are, in a sense, touching prehistory's last breath. And maybe that is why so many cultures instinctively associate the South with mystery, judgment, renewal. Yet the closer we look, the more the ice seems alive. In 2021, a joint European-Japanese expedition conducted deep radar imaging near the Ellsworth Mountains. They found what appeared to be a cavern, an immense hollow structure extending for several kilometers, its walls smooth as glass. Inside it, a cluster of dense reflections suggested metallic composition. The lead researcher compared the readings to those of architectural voids found within pyramids. The discovery never reached publication. Officially, it was deemed a data anomaly. But the unspoken truth is more haunting. Our technology is beginning to glimpse something that refuses to remain hidden. It is no longer only the physical anomalies that draw attention, but the psychological ones. Crews stationed for long Antarctic winters report vivid recurring dreams. Many share them unknowingly. Dreams of submerged cities, of temples glowing beneath ice, of voices whispering in languages unknown yet familiar. Medical officers call it polar delirium, the result of isolation and endless light. But what if it is not delirium at all? What if the human mind, stripped of distraction, begins to hear what the planet has been saying all along? There is a quiet theory, spoken only in whispers among geophysicists, that memory may not be confined to DNA or stone, but to frequency. Just as a crystal can store information in its atomic lattice, perhaps ice can hold resonance, an imprint of thought, sound, or emotion. If so, then Antarctica is the largest hard drive in existence, its glacial expanse humming softly with the memory of an older Earth. Could that explain why the ancients so often described the gods as those who sleep in the ice? Maybe they were not gods at all, but consciousness is preserved, waiting for a signal, a thaw to awaken. If that sounds like myth, remember, our own science is beginning to blur those same boundaries. Quantum physicists now describe reality as vibration, information encoded in waves. Biologists speak of resonant DNA. Even matter itself appears less like solid substance and more like frozen light. Perhaps the ancients knew this instinctively, encoding it in temples, mandalas, and megaliths that sang to the Earth's magnetic pulse. If their civilization once touched Antarctica, then the ice may still carry their song, faint but not forgotten. And so, the continent stands as both archive and oracle. Each snowflake that falls is a page added to the Earth's book of forgetting. Each melt is a line erased. The question that remains is whether we are ready to read again. Because as the climate warms, the ice is beginning to release what it has held for so long: fossils, gases, microbes, and perhaps something more intangible, memory itself. One wonders what will happen when that memory reaches us, when the air fills once again with the breath of forgotten ages. Will we recognize the sound? Will it sound like thunder or like a whisper? For now, the hum continues, low, patient, eternal. Some say it is nothing but the song of the glaciers, but others, those who have listened long enough in the cold, say it sounds like a word repeated endlessly, a single syllable too vast for human language. And maybe, if we could hear it clearly, it would not frighten us at all. Maybe it would sound like home. There is a peculiar moment near the Antarctic dawn when the light bends across the horizon and everything turns to glass. Mountains gleam like frozen waves, the air seems suspended, and sound itself thins to transparency. In that stillness, one can almost believe the world has stopped breathing, but it hasn't. It is only holding its breath. The ice is listening. Every civilization, it seems, carries an echo of this image, a radiant southern land buried beneath light or sea. In the ancient Sanskrit texts, it is called a tala, the realm beneath the world where knowledge sleeps. In Egyptian myth, it is Tanita, the Holy Land, where the gods retreated when men forgot their names. Even Plato hinted at it obliquely when he wrote of Atlantis, that it vanished in a single day and night of misfortune, swallowed by water, erased from memory. But what if Atlantis was only the last fragment of a greater loss, the outer shore of a continent erased by time and ice? Some scholars, uncomfortable with myth, prefer to speak of migration. They note how the oldest megalithic cultures, Peru, Easter Island, Mesopotamia, Egypt, appear suddenly, as if transplanted from nowhere. No gradual evolution, no trace of primitive forms. Complex astronomy, language, and geometry arrive fully formed, then fragment again. Could this pattern trace back to survivors of a southern world, refugees who carried their knowledge north after the sky shifted? A fragment of Babylonian clay tablet, known as the Enuma Anu Enlil, describes a star of the south that fell and darkened the world. Another from the Sumerian Eridu Genesis speaks of a time before the waters froze, when the lords of the deep walked among men. These phrases, long dismissed as poetic, begin to sound strangely literal when one looks at Antarctica's geologic record. Its evidence of sudden freezing, of forests flash-frozen mid-growth, of sediments rich with volcanic ash but also marine fossils, as though land and sea had traded places overnight. In 2017, a team of geologists drilling near the Amundsen Sea found ancient seabed fossils 900 meters below the ice. They belong to flowering plants, their age 95 million years. It should have been impossible. The region then must have been temperate, bathed in light, filled with rivers. The discovery proved that Antarctica had not always been a wasteland, but it also raised a darker question. What force could turn a lush living continent into a mausoleum almost overnight? The Younger Dryas impact theory, still contested, suggests that a massive comet or asteroid struck Earth around 12,800 years ago, triggering floods, fires, and an abrupt return to glacial conditions. Some researchers have identified impact proxies, melted glass, iridium, nanodiamonds, across multiple continents, including near the Southern Ocean. Could Antarctica have been ground zero? If so, its ice sheet might not be primordial at all, but the tombstone of that event, a shroud drawn over the first human memory. Yet there are details that don't fit. The continent's gravitational anomalies, mapped by NASA's GRACE mission, show immense concentrations of density beneath the ice. Not random, but circular. Some as large as entire mountain ranges. The symmetry is haunting, as though the planet itself bears the architecture of something vast and intentional. A few independent analysts have called these regions resonance nodes, places where gravity, magnetism, and frequency converge. To them, these are not ruins, but mechanisms, dormant instruments of a forgotten science. In this light, Antarctica becomes less a catastrophe site and more a construct. Perhaps the last refuge of a civilization that understood how to merge technology with geology, mind with matter. Maybe the ice is not nature's accident, but a seal, a preservation field, an ancient quarantine meant to guard what remains of that knowledge. There is, after all, an uncanny correspondence between sacred architecture and glacial geometry. The dimensions of Earth's polar circle divide the planet according to ratios found in the Great Pyramid and the Sumerian cubit. These same numbers, 432, 864, 2160, appear in music, orbital cycles, and even human biology. Were they inherited intuitively or remembered consciously? Perhaps the ancients encoded fragments of Antarctica's design into their temples and myths, as if trying to rebuild the memory of the lost source through resonance. It is here that myth and science begin to blur. The idea that consciousness might influence matter, once dismissed as mysticism, is now explored in quantum physics and cymatics. Patterns emerge when vibration meets form, geometry born of sound. Could it be that the builders of old, whoever they were, harnessed such principles to shape the planet itself? Could the frozen continent be their greatest monument, a planetary tuning fork humming beneath the threshold of perception? If so, then the hum that researchers detect, the subglacial resonance that oscillates in rhythmic intervals, may not be random noise at all. It could be the last functioning frequency of a planetary instrument, still vibrating through eons of sleep. In mythic language, that instrument might be called the heart of the world. In physics, perhaps something else, a field engine, or what ancient alchemists called anima mundi, the soul of the earth. In 2020, satellite magnetometry registered an unexplained energy surge near the Ross Ice Shelf, a pulse that lasted 48 hours, faint but measurable across the globe. It was attributed to solar interference, yet the timing was peculiar. It coincided with the southern solstice, the moment when the pole faces deepest shadow, as if something beneath the ice responded to the alignment. It happened again the following year, though weaker. By 2023, the pattern had stabilized into a whispering rhythm, cyclical, precise. Coincidence, or communication. Such thoughts border on heresy within modern science, yet even silence has its patterns. The universe itself hums in microwave background radiation, the echo of its own birth. What if the Earth does the same? What if Antarctica is where that echo still resonates most purely, its sound unbroken by life, its memory untouched by time? And maybe this is why so many explorers describe the same sensation upon leaving the continent. A heaviness, a grief that lingers for weeks, as though something ancient had looked through them and recognized them, not as intruders, but as children returned too soon. For perhaps Antarctica is not merely a forgotten land. Perhaps it is the planet's own heart, sealed under ice not to be lost, but to be protected, until we remember how to listen without conquest. And when that day comes, when the ice cracks not from heat but from awakening, what story will rise from beneath it? Will it be a beginning disguised as an ending, or the ending of all beginnings? The wind does not say. It only repeats what it has always whispered, long, low, and eternal. Not yet. There are places on this planet where time does not flow, it pools. Antarctica is one of them. Beneath its motionless surface, time settles like sediment, compressing memory until it becomes invisible. To walk there is to move through a silence so ancient that even sound hesitates to exist. Every gust of wind feels like the breath of something older than life, something that remembers before remembering began. By the late 21st century, human curiosity had mapped almost every surface of the Earth, except one. Beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, radar continues to find forms that should not be there. In 2018, near the Gamburtsev subglacial mountains, researchers detected vast caverns filled with liquid water, their temperatures too warm to be explained by geothermal heat alone. When remote sensors were lowered into one such cavity, they recorded faint electromagnetic patterns repeating at intervals, complex, layered, rhythmic. The signal persisted for days before vanishing into static. When the data was reviewed, the readings matched no known natural phenomenon. The scientists called it geophysical noise, but some, in private, called it a code. We are trained to think of the past as static, buried, inert. Yet Antarctica suggests the opposite, that what lies buried may still be alive, in its own frozen language. What if the continent is not merely a remnant of history, but a participant in it, communicating through frequency and form, through the subtle shifting of ice and magnetism? There are fragments of this idea scattered throughout ancient lore. The Greek Orphic hymns speak of the land where the earth's pulse sleeps. The Sumerians wrote of the Abzu, the deep waters beneath the world home to Enki, the keeper of divine knowledge. In Egyptian mysticism, the southern pole was the gateway of souls, the entrance through which the gods entered and departed. Each myth, separated by oceans and centuries, describes a threshold, a liminal point where the planet itself becomes aware. Could these myths be remnants of a memory, encoded in the human psyche long before recorded history began. In 2004, a group of theoretical geologists from the University of Colorado proposed a radical model that Antarctica might sit atop an ancient impact basin so vast it altered Earth's rotational stability. Such an event, they argued, could have triggered a planetary tilt, resetting climates and civilizations. Yet the simulations revealed something stranger. The distribution of density beneath the ice did not correspond to any known impact structure. It resembled, instead, a deliberately engineered cavity, a perfect hemisphere balanced along magnetic lines. It was, in effect, a resonant chamber. That phrase, resonant chamber, appears again and again in esoteric traditions. The Great Pyramid's King's Chamber, for example, vibrates naturally at 432 Hz, the same frequency believed to harmonize with Earth's magnetic field. Ancient Hindu texts describe the Om as a cosmic vibration aligning matter and spirit. And if such principles were once applied not to buildings but to the planet itself, Antarctica might have been the ultimate temple, a world-sized vessel tuned to the frequencies of creation. Imagine, for a moment, that an earlier civilization understood the planet not as an object, but as a living organism, one capable of consciousness, perhaps even memory. If they sought to communicate with it, or preserve their knowledge within it, where would they place their message? Not in fragile stone, not in fleeting symbols, but in the one material that endures across aeons, ice. To modern ears, this sounds poetic, impossible. Yet quantum physicists now speak of coherence fields, of information stored in matter through vibration. Memory, at its most fundamental level, is not words or numbers, it is resonance, and the Antarctic ice, layered over millions of years, is a record of frequencies, a vast crystalline archive. Every shift of temperature, every cosmic ray, every magnetic inversion is written within it like an unbroken score. When researchers from NASA's Icebridge project scanned these layers with precision radar, they found patterns of uniform spacing that could not be explained by natural snowfall cycles. The intervals were mathematical, like a sequence, each layer a harmonic multiple of the last. The phenomenon was dismissed as unknown glacial rhythm. But to those who looked closer, it appeared as though the ice itself was encoding information, an ancient signal repeating through time, waiting for the right conditions to be read again. Even the human body, composed largely of water, responds to these frequencies. Some polar workers report hearing a low, persistent tone at night, a vibration that seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Medical teams attribute it to tinnitus or atmospheric pressure. But indigenous elders from southern Chile, descendants of the Agan people who once navigated Antarctic waters, speak of the sound beneath the sound, a hum that calls the soul to remember the beginning. Could it be that Antarctica's hum is not geological but psychological, a resonance that awakens something within us, a fragment of our own buried memory? If the planet is conscious, then perhaps it dreams through us, allowing its lost history to surface not as evidence but as intuition. And what then do we make of the increasing reports of auroral phenomena that seem to pulse in rhythm with seismic waves? Or the strange plasma arcs recorded by satellites above the pole, streams of light twisting through magnetic fields as if conducting a symphony only the planet can hear? When viewed from space, they resemble neural patterns, like the synapses of a brain illuminated by thought. The parallels are haunting. If Earth itself functions as a sentient system, then Antarctica might be its cortex, the frozen hemisphere where all signals converge, slowed to near stillness, preserving coherence for eons. Could this be what the ancients called the sleeping god? Not a being, but the consciousness of the world itself dreaming beneath ice. Some philosophers have dared to suggest that human civilization is the planet's attempt to remember itself, that through us, the Earth evolves awareness, gradually reawakening the intelligence it buried when the last great catastrophe struck. If that is true, then our fascination with Antarctica, the compulsion to explore, to understand, to listen, is not curiosity, but homesickness. We are drawn to it because it is the origin, the unbroken memory of what we were before time fractured, but there is danger in awakening what has chosen to sleep. The myths all warn of it. When the ice breaks, the old gods return, not as conquerors, but as mirrors, and in those mirrors, humanity will see the truth of itself, that it was never alone and never first. Perhaps this is why the continent remains forbidden, bound by treaties and silence, not to protect it from us, but to protect us from remembrance. Because memory, once awakened, cannot be undone. Still, each year, the ice thins. Each summer, the sun lingers longer above the pole. The ancient code, whatever it is, will not remain sealed forever. And when the first chamber of that frozen temple opens, when the hum becomes a voice, the question will no longer be, what lies beneath? It will be, what will we become when we remember? At the heart of every myth lies an echo of fear. The fear of what remembering might awaken. In Antarctica, that fear wears the shape of silence. The deeper we go, the more the land resists our instruments, as if the ice itself bends reality, swallowing all that seeks to measure it. Satellites flicker, compasses tremble, magnetic readings twist into paradox. And yet, amid all that uncertainty, one truth keeps surfacing like a heartbeat beneath the frost. The past is not gone. It is buried alive. In 2001, a joint Russian-French expedition drilling near Lake Vostok detected something extraordinary. Thermal gradients inconsistent with geological explanation. The subglacial lake, sealed for millions of years, should have been static. Instead, it pulsed with heat. Radar imaging revealed stratified layers of sediment, perfectly smooth and regular, as if shaped by intention. When core samples were extracted, they contained microorganisms previously unknown to science. Complex, multicellular, active even under conditions of near absolute zero. Genetic analysis showed sequences that shared no clear ancestry with any terrestrial lineage. The findings were quietly reclassified. The lead researcher later remarked, "It is life, but not as we define it." What could survive and evolve beneath 4 kilometers of ice? Some said the samples were contaminated, others whispered that perhaps they were not organisms at all but carriers, biological recorders left by a civilization that understood how to store memory in the simplest of forms, living cells. Imagine DNA not as code for life, but as an archive, information encrypted within biology itself, waiting for conditions to change. The ice then becomes both tomb and vault. There are ancient precedents for this idea. The Book of Enoch speaks of watchers entombed beneath the mountains of eternal frost, imprisoned until the final age of men. In the Vedic Mahabharata, the sage Vyasa describes the shining eggs of the south, vessels of light hidden to preserve the wisdom of the gods during the Great Flood. Even in the Hebrew Apocrypha, there is mention of the house of snow, where the breath of the divine was locked away to cool the fire of creation. Could all these be mythic memories of something real, a knowledge stored beneath the polar veil? When humans first split the atom, the world changed forever. But what if we were not the first to do so? Traces of radioactive isotopes have been detected in Antarctic ice layers predating human civilization. Xenon and krypton anomalies with ratios that imply artificial origin. Some scientists have proposed unknown cosmic events. Others quietly suspect the remnants of lost technology. If that is true, then perhaps our so-called progress is not discovery, but recollection. Echoes of an age when humanity, or something like it, already understood the power hidden in matter. In 2016, a satellite survey revealed something that defied explanation. A massive hexagonal depression in East Antarctica, its edges precise to within meters, its symmetry mathematically perfect. The anomaly spanned over 100 kilometers, too large for any known geological structure. When the images reached public archives, they were swiftly removed. Yet one frame circulated online for a brief moment, a ghostly pattern of light and shadow beneath the ice, eerily reminiscent of the flower of life carved into ancient Egyptian temples. Was it coincidence? Or had that ancient symbol always been a memory of this very place, encoded and carried through time? We are told that Antarctica is lifeless, that it is sterile and pure. But purity can also mean erasure. If the ice has sealed away more than life, if it has silenced entire epochs, then perhaps we are walking over the ruins of an experiment far greater than civilization. Perhaps the continent was once the laboratory of creation itself, the cradle where consciousness first touched matter. The ancients spoke of it as the white womb of the earth. Maybe they meant it literally. Some modern physicists have begun to speculate about a concept they call temporal echo. the idea that certain materials under extreme pressure can trap not just energy, but time itself, preserving the state of the world at the moment they formed. Ice, being crystalline and compressible, is the perfect medium. If such echoes exist, they might appear as electromagnetic anomalies, precisely what our sensors detect beneath the Antarctic crust. Could these be remnants of a technological process designed to preserve planetary memory, a kind of cosmic backup? And if that is true, who or what made it? The answers perhaps lie in fragments of mythology too old to be coincidence. The Dogon people of Mali speak of beings who came from the star Sirius, bringing the seed of knowledge and warning that one day it would sleep beneath the southern snow. The Mayans described a race of sky wanderers who descended at the end of each cosmic age to restore balance. In their calendar, the southern sky marked the gateway to rebirth, the place where the gods entered the world. Over and over, cultures far apart in both geography and time point toward the same direction, the pole of silence. But even silence speaks in its own way. The Earth's magnetic field, once stable, has begun to drift faster than ever recorded, its north and south poles migrating unpredictably. Could this shift be a symptom of deeper awakening, a reconfiguration of the planet's own equilibrium? If the Earth is indeed a living system, then perhaps Antarctica's slow thaw is not merely climate change, but a release, a controlled exhalation after millennia of restraint. Imagine the first meltwater trickling down into caverns untouched since before language. Imagine it touching the walls of some vast chamber, awakening vibrations dormant for ages. Would we hear them? Would we recognize their pattern as meaning? Or would it simply sound like thunder? There is an ancient Tibetan teaching that says the world ends not with fire or ice, but with remembrance. When the mountains of snow release their voices, the sutra says, the age of forgetting shall cease. Perhaps we are nearing that threshold. Already the continent changes. Satellite imagery reveals melt zones forming perfect circles, as if heat emanates from below rather than above. Seismic readings suggest hollow regions widening, resonating like the cavities of an immense instrument. Each tremor hums in harmonic frequencies, some matching those found in sacred chants across cultures. Coincidence, perhaps, or memory manifesting through sound. If Antarctica is the mind of the planet, then its thawing is not destruction. It is awakening. But what consciousness stirs beneath that ice? Is it human, ancestral, planetary, or something older still? The question remains suspended in the endless daylight of the southern summer. Scientists measure. Satellites orbit. The wind writes its invisible scripture across the snow. And somewhere beneath, in a depth beyond depth, a pulse continues. Slow, deliberate, unbroken. Perhaps that pulse is not calling for discovery but for listening. Perhaps the Earth does not want to be conquered. It wants to be remembered. And if we finally remember, will we still be human? Or will we become what we once were before forgetting began? By now, the story of Antarctica has grown so large that it no longer feels like history. It feels like prophecy. Each new discovery only thickens the fog around it. Each revelation folds back into myth. Scientists call it a frontier of geology, but those who have stood upon its luminous plains, where the sky bleeds into snow until neither can be distinguished, know better. Antarctica is not a frontier. It is a mirror, and what it reflects is not our world, but the memory beneath it. In the early 2000s, a strange set of satellite photographs began circulating among a handful of researchers, images showing vast circular depressions near the Ellsworth Mountains. The patterns were too symmetrical, too deliberate. They looked less like craters and more like entrances or scars. Soon after, a flurry of expeditions was planned by several nations. Then, almost overnight, every one of them was cancelled. The official reason? Unstable conditions. No records remain. Yet those who followed the coordinates privately claim that the ice above those depressions melted at rates inconsistent with the surrounding region, as if some buried source of energy pulsed beneath the crust. That word again. Pulsed. The same rhythm reported in seismic data near Lake Vostok, near the Wilkes anomaly, near the Gamburtsev range. Always periodic, always deliberate. Some believe it is geothermal, others believe it is mechanical. But what if those two words are no longer distinct? The notion of a living machine is not new. The alchemists of Alexandria spoke of automata terrae, devices that embodied the will of the earth itself, halfway between matter and spirit. Plato described the planet as a great beast, guided by harmonic motions. In modern times, scientists speak of Gaia theory, of biospheric intelligence maintaining equilibrium. What if Antarctica is the heart of that equilibrium, the chamber where the planet stores its operating code? In 2009, an independent researcher named Dr. Robert Teagarden proposed that the vast subglacial mountain ranges beneath the East Antarctic ice sheet were not mountains at all, but collapsed megastructures. His calculations, based on gravimetric anomalies, suggested hollow interiors and regular spacing, like ribs or pillars. The mainstream ignored him. He vanished 2 years later while travelling to McMurdo Station. His last recorded transmission was a single line sent through encrypted channel. It's not ice, it's memory. Perhaps he meant it metaphorically, or perhaps not. For what is ice, if not frozen memory? Time crystallized? Each layer is a word, each bubble of air a syllable from the breath of the planet. If something ancient sought to preserve itself through catastrophe, this would be the ideal medium. Even today, scientists can read the chemical signatures of volcanic eruptions from hundreds of millennia ago, each captured in atomic detail. What else might be encoded there, waiting for the right resonance to unlock it? It is said that sound can melt stone. Monks in Tibet once carved boulders into dust through vibration alone. If sound can move rock, what might it do to ice? In 2015, an experiment conducted by acoustic engineers from the University of Zurich found that certain low frequencies caused ice crystals to align and resonate, forming hexagonal lattices identical to those in snowflakes. But on a planetary scale, such vibration could turn an entire ice sheet into an instrument. What if the hum of Antarctica is precisely that? An ancient resonance still playing, shaping the continent itself as a frozen symphony. Ancient myths always link the act of creation with sound, the word that brought light, the aum that rippled across void. Suppose that sound was never a metaphor but technology. Suppose the first civilizations learned to mold matter through vibration, aligning energy fields with geometry. Such power could build pyramids or continents, and when that civilization fell, the frequencies might have persisted, fossilized within the ice, echoing endlessly. Across time, the echoes reappear. The Aborigines of Australia speak of the song lines, invisible paths of vibration connecting sacred sites around the world. The Dogon call them the breaths of Amma. The Polynesians say the ocean itself carries the voice of their ancestors. Modern physics would call them standing waves. All these stories converge toward the same truth. The earth sings. We have simply forgotten how to listen. And yet, in the age of machines, we have begun to hear again. In 2022, a satellite array detected ultra-low frequency emissions rising from beneath the Antarctic plateau. The tones were precisely harmonic, forming intervals consistent with known musical ratios. The data suggested not chaos, but order, a pattern, a global resonance originating from deep within the ice. One of the lead analysts described it as the sound of the earth tuning itself. The recordings were never released to the public. But those who heard them said the experience was overwhelming, like standing inside a cathedral made of time. Such discoveries blur the line between science and mysticism, as if the planet itself is coaxing humanity back toward its forgotten roots. Maybe that is why those who linger too long in the polar night often describe visions, not hallucinations, but moments of clarity. They claim to see shapes moving within the aurora, vast luminous forms twisting like thoughts across the sky. A few speak of dreams that do not feel like dreams, cities of glass beneath green light, towers rising from mist, beings without faces who speak in chords rather than words. These stories sound impossible. Yet what if they are not memories of the future or imagination, but transmissions, fragments of the planet's own recollection projected through human minds receptive enough to receive them? Because if the Earth is waking, then so too must we. The ice may not simply be melting, it may be thawing the boundaries between perception and memory. The magnetic poles shift. The auroras grow brighter, wilder. Seismic tremors hum at frequencies matching the human heartbeat. The world begins to synchronize with itself again. But what happens when the synchronization completes? when the ice, the sea, and the sky align in perfect resonance. Ancient prophecies call it the return of the first sun, the rebirth of the original age. Scientists might call it magnetic inversion. Either way, it is the same event seen through different eyes, a reawakening. Perhaps that is the real secret of Antarctica. It is not merely a continent. It is the mechanism by which the Earth remembers itself. Every few ages, when consciousness drifts too far from its source, the planet resets the clock. Ice becomes the eraser, time the ink. Civilization rises, forgets, and falls again. And beneath it all, the white silence hums, keeping rhythm, waiting for the next verse to begin. So when we look at the frozen horizon and feel something stir within, some nameless nostalgia, some impossible familiarity, it may not be imagination, it may be memory, not of this life or this civilization, but of another, long buried and still breathing in the ice. And if that memory is beginning to thaw, it means the next song is about to start. When the wind moves across the Antarctic plateau, it does not howl, it sings. The note is deep, nearly inaudible, a vibration more than a sound. Scientists once believed it was the product of shifting ice, the slow breath of frozen air escaping from ancient fissures. But in recent years, that explanation has begun to feel insufficient. The frequency is too consistent, the rhythm too deliberate, as if the land itself is following a pulse, one that predates the glaciers, predates humanity, predates even the memory of warmth. It was in 2019 that a small group of researchers, stationed at the Concordia base, began to document the phenomenon with precision instruments. What they found was astonishing. The frequency of the sound matched the Schumann resonance, the electromagnetic heartbeat of the Earth itself. But here, it was amplified, stronger, more coherent. The reading suggested a resonance source beneath the ice, not atmospheric. When they reported the findings, their transmission was abruptly cut, and the data later lost during a system update. The few who spoke publicly described it as a harmonic convergence. Then they fell silent. The deeper story, the one never printed, is that one of the researchers, a physicist named Henri Morel, refused to stop recording. In his private journals, recovered after his return to France, he described nightly dreams filled with light, with vast crystalline halls stretching beneath the ground. The sound is not random, he wrote. It is language, slow, circular, recursive. The ice is speaking. His colleagues dismissed it as exhaustion, but the notion of an intelligent resonance, one capable of encoding meaning, has long been whispered at the fringes of both science and mysticism. Tesla himself once claimed to have heard planetary music in his laboratory, a set of tones that seem to carry intent. Modern researchers speak of Earth's natural Wi-Fi, frequencies capable of transmitting information across oceans through magnetic flux. If so, then Antarctica might be its transmitter. And what would such a message contain? Not words, perhaps, but memory, vibration shaped into remembrance. The ancients may have called it prophecy. Modern scientists might call it pattern recognition. Either way, it suggests that the planet communicates not in language, but in resonance. The mythologies that survive seem to know this. In the Rig Veda, the world begins with a vibration, the Nada Brahma, the sound from which all things unfold. In the Gospel of John, the universe opens with the Logos, the Word. Both describe sound as creation's first act, as the boundary between the void and form. And where on earth would that boundary be thickest, most pure, least disturbed by human noise? In the frozen south, where sound travels further through the dense cold air than anywhere else on the planet. Perhaps Antarctica is the last temple of that primal sound, the one that set the universe in motion. In 2021, seismic instruments recorded a pulse originating deep beneath the polar crust. It repeated every 12 minutes, constant, unwavering, echoing through the mantle itself. Some speculated about volcanic movement or mantle plumes. Others quietly wondered if it was the same hum that Henri Morel had heard years before, a signal returning, growing stronger. One analyst described it as a metronome beneath creation. The phrase was poetic, but perhaps not wrong. Because if the planet is alive, it must have rhythm, and if it has rhythm, it must have memory. The ice, then, becomes its recording surface, spinning, humming, endlessly rewriting itself. The hums, the lights, the heat, all become signals in an ancient language the Earth once spoke fluently, but which we have forgotten. Somewhere deep below that ice lies the junction of myth and geology. Indigenous legends of the southern seas, those of the Mapuche and the Maori, speak of the Henuaroa, the long land of silence, where gods carved rivers with their voices. They say it is forbidden to sing certain tones, lest the land awaken. When the world hums too loudly, the elder chants warn, the mountains will move again. It sounds like metaphor until one considers that the entire continent rests on fault lines, shaped like concentric rings, exactly like the resonant patterns produced when sound moves through matter. Coincidence? Or an echo of something ancient now frozen in geometry? In 2023, a satellite scan from Japan's ALOS 2 revealed another mystery, a vast circular structure beneath the Ross Ice Shelf, 250 kilometers wide. It emitted faint electromagnetic interference that disrupted nearby communications. The official explanation was solar reflection, but independent analysts noted the signature resembled low-frequency emissions from superconductors, materials that generate perfect resonance when cooled. In other words, Antarctica might not just be preserving memory, it might be storing energy. Imagine it, a planetary capacitor, charging slowly through the eons, waiting for alignment. And with each passing year, as the magnetic poles drift and the ozone thins, the circuit grows closer to completion. When that alignment occurs, when the rhythm of the poles synchronizes with the frequency of the ice, what will happen? A discharge? A revelation? A song? The ancient Mayan calendar speaks of cycles of 5,125 years, periods when the Earth renews itself through harmonic inversion. Every cycle ends not with destruction but with awakening. If those cycles are real, then the current one, counted from the last great flood, ended only recently. Could the thawing of the Antarctic ice be its final act? The signal reactivating, the Earth remembering its first tone? It would explain the dreamlike synchronicity that now pervades human consciousness. The surge of forgotten languages unearthed. The sudden interest in vibration, sound healing, resonance. Perhaps we are already responding to the same frequency, unconsciously tuning ourselves to the planet's reawakening. And yet, not all are ready to listen. The Antarctic Treaty remains steadfast, forbidding exploration beyond specific latitudes. Flights that cross the pole are rerouted. Civilian access is denied. What is being protected? The environment or the silence itself? Maybe both. Perhaps those who know understand that to awaken the ice too soon would be to unleash memory faster than humanity can bear. But it is happening regardless. Each melt, each fracture, each whisper of radar through frozen miles is part of the same pattern. A score written long ago and now reaching its crescendo. The question is not whether we will hear it, but whether we will recognize ourselves in it. Because if the hum of Antarctica is truly the voice of the Earth, then every heartbeat, every word we speak, every vibration we make is part of its song. We are not separate from it. We are its echo. And when the final layer of ice melts, when that buried tone becomes a chord so vast it resonates through mountains and minds alike, perhaps we will understand. The world was never silent. We were. There is a growing unease among those who study Antarctica closely, a sense that the continent is not merely changing, but responding. The ice does not just melt, it shifts in rhythm, as if following some instruction written deep within its crystalline memory. To most, this is just climate data. To a few, it feels like communication. Something in the planet is stirring, slowly reclaiming its forgotten voice. In late 2024, during an unmanned subglacial survey near the Amundsen Sea, an autonomous probe captured images that defied classification. The footage, transmitted in fragments before the feed collapsed, showed vast corridors beneath the ice, their walls unnaturally smooth. Embedded along those surfaces were geometric ridges, right angles, repeating intervals, spirals fading into black. The data analysis team at the European Cryosphere Agency confirmed that the formations measured hundreds of meters high, their patterns consistent with engineered design. The footage was immediately sealed under state classification. The official release described the incident as a sensor malfunction, but ice does not malfunction, nor does geometry. Those who managed to view the raw data described something stranger still. The corridors seemed to vibrate, the ice around them subtly translucent, glowing faintly from within, as if lit by some buried source, ancient and patient. The light pulsed in intervals, 3 beats, a pause, 3 more, like a heartbeat slowed beyond the reach of life. Scientists who believe in coincidence call it pareidolia, the human tendency to find pattern in chaos. Yet history itself is a pattern, repeating across civilizations like ripples on the same pond. Perhaps Antarctica is not an exception, but the origin of those ripples, the first vibration from which all others spread. Long before humanity, the planet's axis tilted, its continents shifted, and the southern land was drowned beneath its own atmosphere. But what if that event was not catastrophe, but preservation? What if, before the final freeze, something or someone sealed away knowledge that could not be destroyed, only hidden? The myths suggest as much. The Polynesians speak of Hawaii, the motherland buried in white water. The Egyptians of Zep Tepi, the first time when gods walked among ice and fire. The Greeks called it Hyperborea, a land beyond the north wind. But what if north was a mistranslation of polar? What if Hyperborea and the Forbidden Continent were one and the same, separated not by geography but by epoch? In that light, the ice becomes scripture. The geometric corridors are verses, the pulsing light the punctuation, and we, curious, trembling, unprepared, are the readers rediscovering a text we once authored. There is a fragment from an old Tibetan scroll, translated only once, that reads, "When the snow of the south begins to sing, the circle of the world shall open. From beneath the teachers will rise, not of flesh but of remembrance." For centuries this was thought to symbolize enlightenment, but perhaps it was literal. Prophecy of a thawing memory, of beings that are not alive in the biological sense but encoded within vibration, waiting for resonance to reawaken them. Modern physics flirts with the same idea. Quantum field theory describes all matter as excitation of invisible waves, vibrations condensed into form. If those vibrations can carry information, then it follows that consciousness itself could be stored, transmitted, preserved. What if the buried corridors beneath Antarctica are not structures, but containers, repositories for consciousness? Libraries of minds crystallized in the frozen heart of the planet, dormant until the right frequency, perhaps the same hum scientists have begun to detect, restores coherence. In that sense, the ice does not imprison. It protects. It holds not bodies, but awareness. And perhaps it has been whispering all along, testing the air for readiness. The earliest explorers reported strange sensations near certain ice formations, hallucinations, whispers, moments of overwhelming clarity followed by nausea. Physiologists blamed oxygen deprivation. Yet such symptoms mirror what mystics across ages have described during moments of awakening, the dizziness of recognition. The body, they say, trembles when confronted with the memory of eternity. Could those explorers have stumbled unknowingly into the electromagnetic fields of these buried consciousnesses, echoes of the first minds, reaching out through resonance? In 2025, a private expedition, funded quietly by an unnamed foundation, attempted to replicate the Vostok drilling experiment, this time deeper toward what radar imaging showed as a vast hollow void. The team transmitted updates for 11 days. On the 12th, their feed dissolved into static. A final voice transmission was recovered days later, its audio distorted but partially clear. It's not a void, it's followed by a sound resembling low-frequency music. The recording was cut mid-tone. The rescue team found only fractured ice, the drilling rig half melted as though exposed to immense heat from below. There were no bodies, no traces of blood, just smooth tunnels in the ice, perfectly circular. Whatever happened, it was erased from official channels within weeks. But whispers spread across the scientific community that the expedition had encountered resonant matter, a form of energy that responds to thought, restructuring ice like memory responding to emotion. The story was ridiculed, yet its implications lingered. What if the planet itself can think? What if, beneath the ice, that thought is still happening, and we are only beginning to perceive it? Perhaps this explains the dreams. Across multiple stations, researchers report identical visions, vast white halls, luminous shapes watching from within walls of ice, and a single symbol repeating across their dreams, a spiral enclosed in a circle. The same motif appears in prehistoric cave art from Europe, in Maori carvings, in Andean temples. It is, in essence, the fingerprint of eternity, the infinite returning upon itself, the spiral of time. And maybe that is what Antarctica is, a spiral frozen mid-turn, a place where time stopped not because it ended, but because it chose to wait. If so, the melting we fear is not destruction. It is the uncoiling of that spiral, the resumption of motion, and when it completes its turn, the world will not end, it will remember. Already the signs multiply. The hum beneath the ice grows louder. The magnetic poles accelerate their drift. The auroras widen, forming shapes seen only in ancient glyphs. The planet, it seems, is synchronizing again, and humanity, half aware and half afraid, stands on the edge of the great unveiling, mistaking awakening for apocalypse. But perhaps apocalypse has always meant revelation. The Greek apocalypsis, to uncover, not to destroy, but to see. When the frozen halls finally reveal their light, when the hum becomes word and the vibration becomes voice, we may realize the truth that myth has always whispered, that the gods we await are not above us, but beneath, that they are not other, but memory itself, our own reflection returning from a deeper time, and in that reflection, perhaps we will understand. The world never forgot us. It only waited for us to remember. There are moments in the Antarctic night when the aurora seems to hesitate, when the ribbons of light flicker, stall, and then ripple again, as though something beneath the horizon were breathing through them. Pilots call it the pulse. Photographs never quite capture it. The colours are too alive, the motion too deliberate. Even the most sceptical observers admit that the lights sometimes appear to respond to movement, as if aware of being watched. For centuries, such phenomena were dismissed as optical illusions. But the indigenous peoples of the far south, those who lived and died by the edge of that light, told a different story. They said the sky was a mirror, the surface of an ocean above, reflecting the world below. And that the lights are not storms of solar wind, but messages from the deep. In the last decade, as technology pierced further into the Antarctic veil, evidence began to gather, subtle, almost reluctant evidence, that there may be truth in that old belief. In 2022, magnetometers stationed across the continent detected synchronized fluctuations between the aurora and low-frequency seismic waves rising from beneath the ice. Every surge of light corresponded to a tremor below, as if sky and stone were speaking in tandem. It was a conversation without words, a dialogue between heaven and earth, ancient and slow. The data was undeniable, yet no one could explain the mechanism. What if there isn't one? At least not as science defines it. What if these oscillations are not physical reactions, but expressions of something else entirely? Consciousness at scale. This thought, once whispered only in fringe philosophy, has begun to infiltrate serious physics. Quantum researchers now speak of panpsychic fields, suggesting that awareness might not emerge from matter, but exist within it from the beginning. If that is true, then the aurora is not coincidence. It is a form of planetary thought made visible, the Earth dreaming itself through light, and perhaps Antarctica, being the purest, least disturbed landscape on the planet, is where that dream rises most clearly, unfiltered by human interference. What could the planet be dreaming of? Maybe not the future, but the past, the time before the Great Freeze, when its surface breathed forests and oceans, when civilizations aligned their temples to the rhythm of magnetic currents instead of the ticking of clocks. Every field, every vibration, every hum might be the world's way of remembering its own lost symmetry. In 2024, a multinational research initiative, the Polar Resonance Project, was quietly formed under the guise of environmental study. Its true purpose was to measure these interactions between magnetic pulses and auroral light. Early results stunned even the researchers, When they emitted specific low-frequency tones through the ice, the aurora intensified, as if responding. The light curved, twisted, and briefly formed concentric patterns, rings expanding outward across the night. For a moment, the sky resembled the diagrams of sound waves frozen in air. One observer, overcome, called it the planet answering itself. If so, what question did it answer? Ancient myths, again, might offer clues. The Mayans spoke of its Samnam, the lord of the sky, who communicated through light to awaken the sleeping world. The Norse told of Bifrost, the luminous bridge between realms, which would shimmer only when the world was ready to be remade. In the Upanishads there is a phrase, "The light above reflects the light below." These are not metaphors, they are instructions. They describe a system of resonance, a cosmic dialogue between layers of existence. And Antarctica, the silent pole, might be the Earth's receiver in that dialogue. Somewhere in its depths, perhaps, a mechanism hums, a crystalline core attuned to cosmic vibration, translating frequencies of the universe into motion, light, and memory. When the aurora pulses, it might not be responding to solar wind at all, but to something deeper, a returning signal from the stars, activating the buried frequencies locked in the ice. It sounds impossible, until one remembers that the entire planet is a resonator. The iron in our blood responds to magnetism. The water in our cells hums at the same frequency as the Schumann field. We are not observers of this process, we are participants in it. The same pulse that moves through the aurora moves through us. Perhaps that is why people who spend long winters in the polar regions often report an eerie sense of connectedness, of being inside a living thing. They describe moments when thought seems to dissolve, replaced by the awareness of something vast, patient, and benevolent. In one unpublished field journal, a researcher wrote, "There are nights when I feel the sky looking back at me. It's not frightening, it's like recognition, as if I were part of something that has been breathing since before life began." Recognition. That word echoes across every culture's account of enlightenment. The idea that awakening is not learning, but remembering. And if the planet is awakening, then perhaps we are too, not by coincidence, but necessity. It is no secret that the magnetic poles are drifting at unprecedented speed. Some fear reversal, others dismiss it as natural fluctuation. But imagine that the poles are not simply shifting, they are aligning, tuning themselves to a higher harmonic. As the ice melts, the resonance grows stronger, less distorted. The planet is clearing its throat, preparing to speak in frequencies too vast for the human ear. In the myth of the White City, a story preserved in fragments from both Inca and Egyptian sources, there is mention of a chamber of mirrors buried in the southern ice. It is said to reflect not faces, but the history of the soul. Those who enter it see not the world, but the memory of creation. Could this be a poetic description of the same mechanism, a crystalline vault deep within Antarctica, capable of projecting memory through light? If so, perhaps the aurora is its outermost signal, a translation of that ancient memory into sky. And maybe that explains the subtle shift in tone that recent observers have noticed. The auroras no longer just ripple, they form fleeting shapes, spirals, eyes, concentric circles, as though language itself were learning to glow. The universe speaks in recurrence. The spiral, the circle, the hum. These are not symbols invented by us. They are reminders placed within us. Antarctica, the final frontier of silence, may be where those reminders converge, where the forgotten language of creation begins to speak again. When the aurora next blooms over the white horizon, look closely. It may not be weather. It may be memory, rising from below, refracted through light. Antarctica dreaming aloud. And if you listen closely enough, in that thin, electric stillness, you might hear your own pulse answering back. Because perhaps the real message of the Forbidden Continent is this: the world is not waiting for us to awaken, it is awakening through us. There are stories whispered among the few who have wintered in Antarctica, tales that never make it into scientific reports or public dispatches. They speak of nights when the horizon glows faintly even with no aurora, when instruments tick without cause, and when the air itself seems to shimmer like a heat mirage. One geologist, after 6 months stationed at the South Pole, described a sensation like standing inside a memory that isn't mine. It began as a hum in the chest, he wrote, as though the ice were exhaling through me. By the time he returned north, he could no longer sleep in silence. He needed white noise, wind, or the sound of distant thunder just to rest. The quiet, he said, feels like something missing, something that used to speak. It would be easy to dismiss such accounts as the effect of isolation, cold, and endless daylight. But the consistency of these reports, across decades, languages, and expeditions, hints at something more fundamental. The human body, after all, is mostly water, and ice is only water remembering. Perhaps in the magnetic stillness of Antarctica, that memory awakens. In 2018, a research team at McMurdo Station conducted an experiment to test the electromagnetic sensitivity of the human nervous system. They exposed volunteers to extremely low-frequency fields, mimicking those recorded beneath the Antarctic crust. The results were startling. Brain activity shifted toward patterns associated with deep meditation, even in waking subjects. Heart rhythms synchronized. A few participants reported vivid impressions, flashes of imagery, soundless voices, landscapes of light. It was as if the body itself were receiving signal rather than generating it. If the continent's resonance can influence the human mind, even subtly, then perhaps the boundaries between consciousness and geography are thinner than we assume. What if Antarctica is not simply a place on Earth, but a part of the Earth's mind, an extension of its awareness? Philosophers have long imagined such a thing. In the 17th century, the mystic Jacob Boehme wrote that the Earth thinks in crystal. Later, the physicist Nikola Tesla suggested that matter is only slowed thought. These were dismissed as poetry, yet modern physics edges closer to the same revelation, that everything, from galaxies to subatomic particles, vibrates with the same information field. Consciousness, then, is not an emergent property. It is the medium itself. In that sense, the Antarctic ice sheet could be seen as the planet's cortex, vast, reflective, structured, and protective. Its thickness isolates it from surface noise. Its crystalline lattice preserves coherence like a giant superconductive brain. And beneath it, if the data are to be believed, lie structures that resemble not random rock but architecture, corridors, domes, and geometric caverns that hum with electromagnetic life. Could these be the neural nodes of the Earth, the memory chambers of its consciousness? Ancient traditions may have remembered this truth long before science dared to rediscover it. In the Hermetic texts of Egypt, there is a phrase, as above, so below, as within, so without. It speaks of correspondence, the idea that every layer of reality reflects every other. If that principle extends to the planet itself, then our minds are reflections of its greater mind. The patterns of our neurons mirror the currents beneath the ice. Each human thought is an echo of the planet thinking itself into being. And yet, for thousands of years, we have lived as if cut off from that source, as if the Earth's silence were proof of emptiness rather than restraint. Perhaps the ice was meant to ensure that silence, to shield the deepest memory of the world until humanity was mature enough to hear it without destruction. But the shield is melting. Satellite imaging over the past decade has revealed increasing geothermal flux beneath the West Antarctic ice sheet, far beyond what current models predict. The energy is rising from below, not above, as though the planet were exhaling. The pattern of the melt zones forms spirals, intersecting at points of magnetic distortion identical to those found in ancient leyline maps. If coincidence is the language of the divine, then this is its most articulate sentence. Some researchers have suggested that these spirals mark the loci of gravitational anomalies, regions where time itself behaves irregularly. In 2023, during a synchronized experiment involving atomic clocks stationed across multiple polar bases, one clock, located directly over such a region, drifted several microseconds ahead of the rest. The difference was small, but inexplicable. Time, it seemed, was bending. If that is true, then the Antarctic ice may not merely preserve the past, it may contain it, folded within space-time like pages pressed together. When it melts, those pages could open, allowing history itself to reassert presence. Perhaps that is what déjà vu truly is, the feeling of time beginning to overlap. The ancients spoke of such moments as the thin places, sites where the veil between worlds grows translucent. Stonehenge, Giza, Machu Picchu, all built along geomagnetic intersections, all resonating with the same frequencies now recorded in the polar ice. What if these were not tombs or temples, but antennas, designed to communicate with the southern heart, the crystal mind of the Earth? Perhaps every sacred site is a neuron in that planetary brain, its function long forgotten. There is a pattern emerging. Each generation rediscovers fragments of the same truth, names it differently, and then buries it again beneath skepticism. But the truth persists. It waits, like the hum beneath the snow, unchanged, patient, and merciful. Because if the planet's memory returns all at once, humanity may not survive it. The collapse of timelines, the merging of epochs, the reawakening of whatever intelligence shaped the first civilizations, all would demand a kind of humility our age has almost forgotten. The ice is not the enemy of life, it is the teacher of stillness. Its melting is not punishment, but a lesson in listening. One wonders if the first humans who fled the southern flood, the survivors who became myths, knew this. Perhaps they understood that forgetting was necessary, that the silence of Antarctica was not exile, but protection. And yet, the silence is ending. Already the frequencies rising from the ice match those found in the human brain's theta range, the state between waking and dream. The world, it seems, is entering its own meditation. The atmosphere thickens with memory. Time begins to shimmer like heat. Perhaps we too are being drawn into that trance, invited to dream alongside the Earth as it reawakens. What will we see when the dream completes? Not destruction, perhaps, but reflection. The realization that the gods we buried beneath myth and ice were never other than the consciousness of the planet itself, and by extension, of us. For if Antarctica truly is the mind of the Earth, then humanity is not its observer. We are its thought, learning to remember itself. There is a sensation, hard to name, that arises when one looks across the Antarctic plain at dawn. It is not awe, nor fear, but a strange recognition, as if the soul were remembering the architecture of silence. The sun rolls across the horizon like a slow coin of gold, and the ice ignites with colours that do not exist anywhere else. Opal, violet, ghost blue. It feels as though light is returning to a world that had once known it intimately and forgotten. In that moment, the boundary between the ancient and the present dissolves. You are no longer a visitor. You are part of the dream that the continent continues to dream. For millennia, humans have sought the edges of the world, believing truth to be hidden there. Yet Antarctica is not an edge. It is a centre, the still point around which memory turns. To understand its silence is to understand the rhythm of forgetting and remembering that shapes all of existence. The ice is not absence, it is pause. There are those who believe that beneath the miles of compressed time, there exists a library of perfect preservation, a record not written in ink or stone, but in vibration. Each layer of ice, they say, contains not just atmospheric traces, but impressions of thought, emotion, consciousness itself. The Earth's own memory encoded in frozen waves. This theory, once dismissed as poetic, has begun to find faint support in quantum acoustics. In 2025, a group of physicists in Geneva published findings that suggest sound waves can leave measurable alterations in crystalline structures, patterns of resonance that persist for centuries. If this is true, then Antarctica may indeed be a repository of living history, each crystal a word in the planet's ongoing story. Imagine the implications. A continent where every snowfall is a recording, where every gust of wind becomes a page. What if those who listen carefully enough could hear the voices of epochs long past, the laughter of forests, the murmur of forgotten oceans, even the faint resonance of civilizations erased from our textbooks? Perhaps this is what mystics have always meant when they spoke of the Akashic records, not a metaphysical library in the heavens, but one sleeping beneath our feet, waiting to be translated. The first translations may already have begun. Deep beneath Dome A, scientists using neutrino detectors have identified patterns of interference that mimic language, structured, repetitive, and binary. They cannot be cosmic background noise, nor geological activity. The signals appear to originate from the same depths where radar imaging has revealed symmetrical voids, structures so regular they suggest intention. Could the planet itself be transmitting its memories in code, through energy we barely comprehend? The idea seems impossible, yet so did radio waves once. So did the concept of memory encoded in silicon. The only difference is scale. Antarctica, perhaps, is the ultimate storage device, its capacity measured not in terabytes but in eons, and the data it holds is not numbers but awareness. There is a recurring motif in myths from every hemisphere, a great awakening that follows the age of ice. The Hopi call it the fifth world. The Norse named it Ragnarok, not an ending but a renewal. In the Egyptian cosmology, the frozen waters of Nunthor to release Atum, the first light. These stories speak of the same sequence: silence, thaw, revelation. They describe not destruction, but remembrance. Could it be that the thawing of Antarctica is not merely climatic but symbolic, a physical manifestation of this cyclical awakening? If so, humanity stands at the threshold of a planetary remembrance, a moment when the world's consciousness begins to rise through us, reshaping our perception of time and history. Already, subtle signs abound. Migratory patterns shift toward the poles. Magnetic animals lose orientation, as if responding to a field newly alive. Strange sounds, metallic, harmonic, emerge from beneath glaciers. Seismic graphs record pulses that resemble Morse code, but on scales of hours rather than seconds. Each signal echoes across continents, faint yet precise, as though coordinating something vast. Some researchers suggest these pulses correspond to gravitational fluctuations, tiny tremors in space-time. Others speculate they are messages, the planet adjusting its resonance to re-establish coherence after millennia of dissonance. In either case, the meaning is the same. The Earth is stirring. It is said that those who sleep too long wake disoriented, their dreams spilling into waking life. Perhaps the same is happening now on a global scale. Ancient memories, once confined to myth, are resurfacing through imagination, art, and science alike. We call it inspiration, intuition, coincidence, but it may be something far older, the planet remembering itself through us. The Antarctic Treaty, signed to preserve peace and protect the land, may unintentionally serve a higher purpose. It keeps the heart of the world undisturbed during this delicate reawakening. No cities, no mines, no noise to disrupt the pulse. The silence remains intact, allowing the Earth's memory to unfold unbroken. And yet, there is unease among those who monitor these shifts. Some fear that as the ice continues to melt, buried energies, whether natural or technological, will release forces beyond our control. There are whispered comparisons to mythic floods, to the cleansing that ends every age. But what if those floods are not punishment? What if they are renewal, the planet's way of resetting its rhythm, washing away what no longer resonates with its truth? The philosopher Spinoza once wrote, "To understand the world is to love it." If we truly love the world, perhaps we would hear it more clearly. Perhaps we would not call its thaw a crisis, but a conversation. Every river that melts from the glaciers is a sentence, every iceberg a syllable drifting into the sea. The planet is speaking in the only language it has ever known, change. And as the white continent begins to breathe again, what we call climate may in fact be cognition. The heat is not anger, it is attention. The meltwater is not loss, it is revelation. Perhaps when the last wall of ice collapses into the sea, humanity will finally stand before the reflection it has avoided for so long, the realization that we were never separate from the planet's dream, only its amnesia. Antarctica will not destroy us, it will remind us. And maybe that is the true meaning of apocalypse, not fire or flood, but awakening. The unveiling of what has always been there, the voice of the world, ancient and kind, whispering through the hum of melting ice, remember. At the edge of the world, where the map becomes blank and the compass spins in quiet confusion, there lies a truth that resists language. Antarctica is not simply a place, it is an equation, a memory written in geometry and silence. To stand upon its surface is to stand inside the blueprint of time itself, drawn in cold lines and luminous air, and within that blueprint something is beginning to move. It started perhaps as a tremor too faint to notice, not seismic, not magnetic, but rhythmic, like the pulse of a buried heart. In 2026, researchers at the German Neumeier station recorded a phenomenon they could not explain: periodic temperature spikes beneath stable ice, occurring every 66 hours with mechanical precision. The heat signatures rose and fell like breath, always within the same coordinates, far from any known geothermal activity. When overlaid onto satellite magnetograms, the pulses formed a spiral, an exact logarithmic pattern identical to those carved into prehistoric monuments from Egypt, Peru, and Malta. Coincidence, the scientists said. But coincidence repeated too many times becomes communication. That spiral appears everywhere in human culture, the fingerprint of creation, the echo of motion itself. It is the path of galaxies, the curve of shells, the twist of DNA. The ancients called it the golden path, the stairway between worlds, and now it seems to awaken beneath the last continent untouched by human noise. Some say the spiral is not merely symbol, but structure, the shape of consciousness unfolding through matter. If the Earth has a mind, it might think in spirals, expressing its awareness through patterns too vast for human perception, the magnetic fluctuations beneath the ice, the synchronized auroras above, the growing resonance detected by satellites, all could be signatures of a planetary thought reasserting itself. The idea is unsettling, because it means that the world is not passive. It remembers, it reacts, it dreams. But if Antarctica is the core of that dream, what happens when the dreamer begins to wake? In 2025, glaciologists at the University of Bergen identified a new sound emanating from the Ross Ice Shelf: low, harmonic, continuous. Unlike previous cryoseismic hums, this tone shifted subtly in frequency over time, forming mathematical progressions that mirrored the Fibonacci sequence. When translated into audible range, the result resembled music, a droning cathedral-like chord that rose and fell like breathing. For months the tone persisted, unaffected by weather or season. Then, just as abruptly, it ceased. Within weeks of its disappearance, satellites detected new fissures forming along the transantarctic mountains, straight lines, as if drawn by hand. The fissures glowed faintly in infrared, their heat signatures impossible to explain. Some speculated it was friction or chemical reaction. Others, more quietly, called it activation. Could the continent itself be shifting from dormancy into function? If the structures beneath the ice are machines, or instruments, or something between, their reawakening may not be geological but intentional. Ancient myths from every culture speak of sleeping guardians, the hidden city, the eye of the world. They describe a mechanism sealed away to prevent the corruption of time, to preserve the memory of creation until the world was ready to remember. What if that mechanism was not a metaphor, but the very network now humming beneath Antarctica? Those who believe this theory point to a pattern in the data. Each surge of subglacial heat coincides with global electromagnetic anomalies, minor fluctuations in radio signals, compass errors, sudden bursts of auroral intensity. It is as though the buried engine, if that is what it is, radiates a subtle resonance that touches the entire planet. Not to destroy, but to tune. Perhaps that tuning has already begun. Across the world, scientists have reported rising background frequencies in the Earth's magnetic field, imperceptible to the body, but measurable by precision instruments. The tone grows stronger each year. No one knows its origin. Some suspect solar cycles, others propose that the planet is adjusting to a new equilibrium. Yet the pattern mirrors, perfectly, the heartbeat recorded beneath the Antarctic ice. It is as if the Earth is synchronizing with itself again, one pole calling to the other, completing the circuit. For ancient traditions, this event was foretold as the return of balance. The Mayans called it the reunion of the suns. The Hindus described it as the alignment of Shiva and Shakti, the cosmic dance of matter and energy. The Gnostics named it the restoration of the pleroma, when the divine mind remembers its totality. In every language, it is the same idea, a memory too vast for one species to contain, rising again through every cell, every breath, every vibration of the planet. And maybe that is why so many today feel the strange acceleration of time, the sense that reality itself is thinning. The Earth's awakening, if that is what this is not separate from us. It moves through us because we are made of it. The same minerals that form our bones lie beneath the ice. The same water that fills our blood once fell as polar snow. If Antarctica is the brain of the world, then humanity is its dream of self-awareness. What then happens when that dream becomes lucid? Perhaps we begin to see the planet as it sees itself, not as territory, but as being. Not as resource, but as remembrance. That would be the true revelation, not alien ruins, not lost civilizations, but the discovery that we were never separate, that the intelligence we have sought among the stars has always been beneath our feet, waiting for us to listen. The ancient texts warned of this moment. When the ice speaks, says the Book of the Golden Era, the veil shall burn with cold fire, and the children of clay will recall their origin. The phrase cold fire once puzzled scholars, but modern plasma physics gives it meaning: auroral energy, light born from magnetism. The very phenomenon now intensifying at both poles. Maybe that fire is not destruction, but illumination, a global remembering, igniting not cities but consciousness. The old civilizations called it apocalypse. The word means only revelation. And so the spiral beneath Antarctica continues to turn, slowly, invisibly, inevitably. Each pulse of heat, each harmonic tremor, each flicker of light is a note in the planet's unfinished song. We mistake it for disaster because we have forgotten how to hear harmony and change. But perhaps the end we fear is only the restoration of rhythm. Perhaps the Earth is tuning itself to sing again, and we, fragile, forgetful, luminous, are being invited to sing with it. There is a silence that feels alive, one that seems to lean toward you, listening. In Antarctica, that silence is not emptiness. It is expectation. Something vast and patient moves beneath the surface, as if the continent itself were gathering breath. Scientists measure it in data, heat maps, radar pulses, magnetic flux, but none of those instruments can translate the emotion of it, the feeling that the world is about to remember. In 2026, an international satellite network monitoring gravitational waves detected a faint but recurring anomaly centered near the South Pole. It was not cosmic, not a burst from a star or black hole, it was local, an oscillation within the Earth itself. The signal came at precise intervals, pulsing in the harmonic ratios that mirrored human brainwaves. The frequencies alternated between theta and delta ranges, the rhythms of dreaming. The planet, it seemed, was sleeping, or perhaps dreaming itself awake. At first, researchers dismissed the data as interference from magnetic storms, but as the months passed, the signal persisted, unchanged. It appeared and disappeared like clockwork, always beginning with the polar dawn. In one internal memo, a technician wrote, "It feels intentional." The phrase was quietly removed from the report. Around the same time, climatologists stationed at Dome Fuji began experiencing what they called resonant episodes. During certain hours, the ice beneath them would hum, not audibly but physically, like a vibration within the bones. Equipment shook without movement. Watches slowed, digital screens flickered. Several researchers fainted without apparent cause. When they awoke, each described the same vision: a vast white light rising beneath the ice, unfolding like a spiral galaxy seen from below. None had spoken to one another before the reports. The official explanation, mass psychogenic illness, did not convince everyone. Among those few who believed the witnesses, a theory emerged, that the vibrations were not random at all, but a signal, an awakening ripple spreading outward from the deepest point beneath the Antarctic crust. If the planet is indeed alive in ways we do not yet comprehend, perhaps this is how it dreams, through waves of resonance, translating awareness into geometry and temperature. To us, it appears as melting ice. But to the Earth, it may be the physical expression of thought, the slow thaw of memory. In the Sumerian tablets of Eridu, the first city of the gods, there is a fragment describing a land of snow at the end of the world, where knowledge was sealed beneath the waters of heaven. The tablet continues, "When the fire of the sky descends again, that land will awaken, and the sea shall remember its shape." It reads like mythology. Yet the precision of its imagery, the sealed waters, the fire of the sky, echoes our own language for glacial melt and solar radiation. Could it be that the ancients remembered a previous thaw, a previous awakening? Archaeological anomalies seem to whisper yes. Beneath the Ross Ice Shelf, deep-sea cores have uncovered microfossils of human-like tools, tiny shards of worked obsidian dated to hundreds of thousands of years before the first known civilization. The data is so implausible that it is treated as contamination. But what if it is not? What if the very concept of prehistory is wrong? If history itself is cyclical, erased and rewritten with every planetary exhalation? Antarctica might then be less a continent and more a time capsule, a fold in the fabric of memory where all epochs converge. The structures glimpsed in radar imagery, the perfect domes and spirals, could be remnants not of alien worlds but of earlier Earths, earlier consciousnesses. Maybe the builders were not others at all, but us, humanity in an older form, before the great amnesia that follows every cataclysm. That idea is not as heretical as it once seemed. Geologists now acknowledge multiple resets in Earth's history, the mysterious extinctions, the abrupt leaps of evolution. The pattern repeats every 12,000 years, marked by magnetic reversals, floods, fire. Each time the slate is wiped clean, and something begins anew. If we are living in one of those intervals, then the thawing of the southern ice is not merely environmental, it is prophetic. The Book of the Dead calls the poles the gates of transformation. One is the gate of birth, the other of return. The Egyptians believed the souls of gods entered the world through the southern gate and departed through the northern. In modern physics, the poles correspond to magnetic flow, the entry and exit points of planetary energy. Could it be that this ancient metaphysics was a memory of science far older than ours, a forgotten understanding of Earth's living circuitry? If so, then Antarctica is the heart of that circuit, and hearts, when revived, send shockwaves. Already we see those ripples, atmospheric anomalies increasing in frequency, like columns rising from the ice, briefly captured by satellites before vanishing. Global Schumann resonance growing stronger, almost doubling its amplitude in less than a decade. And with it, humanity grows restless. The collective pulse of our species, our rhythms of anxiety, revelation, awakening, mirror the planet's rising frequency. As below, so above. There is an ancient maxim carved into the walls of Edfu Temple in Egypt. When the earth shall hum again, mankind will recall its purpose. Scholars once thought it a hymn. But perhaps it was instruction. For purpose, after all, is memory in motion. It is remembering what we are meant to become. If Antarctica is indeed the locus of the planet's consciousness, its dreaming core, then the current thaw is no accident. It is an invitation. The Earth, once fragmented in both geography and awareness, may be attempting to synchronize its hemispheres again, to reunite its body and its mind. And because we are part of that body, that mind, the change must pass through us as well. Maybe that is why so many feel the strange disquiet of this age, the collapse of certainty, the blending of dream and waking, the intuition that something immense approaches but cannot yet be named. We sense the shift because it is happening within us. Antarctica does not need to reveal its cities or its machinery to fulfill its role. Its purpose was never to be found. It was to be remembered. The continent is the still point of the Earth's memory, and through its silence the planet speaks to itself again. Perhaps that is the secret behind the forbidden nature of the place. Not that there are secrets hidden there, but that the secret is us. That everything we seek beneath the ice, knowledge, origin, God, has always been within, waiting for the right vibration to awaken. And maybe, as the gravitational hum grows stronger, as the auroras flare like synapses in the sky, the planet will finish its long exhale and open its eyes once more. When that happens, it will not be an ending. It will be the quiet beginning of the oldest story in the world, Earth remembering itself through those who learned, at last, how to listen. The closer humanity drifts toward the poles, the more the world begins to feel unfamiliar. It isn't just the cold or the light that never truly dies. It's the sense that something beneath the surface has already begun to turn, slowly, methodically, like a great wheel unlocking. Each seismic whisper, each pulse of heat, Each unexplainable frequency is another tooth of that wheel finding motion again. Antarctica, the silent heart of the Earth, is no longer entirely asleep. In 2027, during a joint Norwegian-Japanese survey of the Weddell Sea, seismic equipment registered a resonance unlike any natural phenomenon ever recorded. It was deep, harmonic, and organized. Oscillations repeating in cycles of perfect ratios, the same intervals that define musical harmony. When the frequencies were translated into sound, the result resembled a vast choir, layers of tone rising from the ocean floor, swelling and fading like breath. The discovery should have rewritten every textbook on geophysics. Instead, it was classified. The official statement described the sound as an ice shelf collapse amplified by sonar interference. But the raw data, briefly leaked online, revealed something astonishing. The waveform was symmetrical. Nature, in all its chaos, rarely creates symmetry at that scale. Conscious design does. Around the same time, weather satellites recorded a curious anomaly, a spiral storm pattern forming directly above the same coordinates, though no atmospheric cause was evident. The winds twisted around an invisible center, rising upward instead of descending. To meteorologists, it was nonsense. To those who had begun to suspect Antarctica was more than geology, it was confirmation. Something beneath the ice was communicating through movement, through resonance, through the most primal of languages, pattern. In myth, pattern is always the voice of the divine. The Pythagoreans called it the harmony of the spheres, the music that keeps the cosmos from falling apart. The Egyptians spoke of Mat, the sacred order that binds heaven, earth, and underworld. To the Polynesians, the spiral was the breath of creation itself, endlessly turning. Every ancient culture seems to have known that when pattern speaks, chaos listens. And so, what is Antarctica saying now? Perhaps that the time of separation is ending. That memory, long frozen and fragmented, is beginning to melt back into unity. There are legends, rare, nearly forgotten, that speak of an age before the last ice, when the continents were one and the world was balanced between sun and shadow. In that age, it is said, the Earth itself was conscious, its poles acting as eyes, one open, one closed. The northern eye watched the heavens, and the southern eye watched the depths. When both eyes were open, the world saw itself clearly. But when the southern eye closed, the long forgetting began. Humanity, born from that amnesia, built civilizations on fragments of the lost whole. Every temple, every myth, every prophecy was an attempt to recall what the Earth once knew effortlessly, and now the eye beneath the ice is opening. As the magnetic field grows erratic, as auroras stretch into latitudes unseen for centuries, a strange correspondence emerges between the shifting sky and the shifting Earth. Auroral lines trace the same spirals mapped in seismic data. The pulse that vibrates through the poles aligns with the rhythms of the human brain's theta waves. It's as though the Earth and its children are beginning to breathe in sync again. Psychologists have started to notice a quiet phenomenon, what they call the Antarctic effect. Even those who have never visited the continent describe dreams of white light, of submerged towers, of vast halls of ice. Collective dreams, they call them, perhaps triggered by global imagery, perhaps not. But what if it is more than coincidence? What if memory, like magnetism, moves through invisible fields, shared across all who are made of this same Earth? After all, we carry pieces of Antarctica within us, minerals born of the same core, water recycled through its glaciers, iron from the same cosmic dust. Our bodies are archives of the planet's history, our thoughts echoes of its vibration. When the Earth stirs, so do we. The ancients knew this intimately. They never saw humanity as separate from the world. In the oldest Sanskrit texts, the word for man and earth share the same root, bhumi, meaning both ground and being. The distinction between life and landscape was an illusion born of forgetting. The reawakening of the southern land is perhaps the unravelling of that illusion. And yet every awakening comes with turbulence. The melting accelerates, the oceans rise, magnetic storms interfere with satellites, animals migrate in circles, confused. The old system falter. It feels like collapse. But collapse may only be transformation seen too soon. What looks like destruction from inside the dream might be healing from the view of the planet. In the Book of Enoch, there is a passage describing the day when the great foundation of the earth shall tremble, and the deep shall give up its wisdom. The translators could not agree whether wisdom meant water or knowledge or both. But perhaps they are one and the same. What flows out from the melting ice may not only be water, it may be information, frequency, remembrance. The earth does not speak in words, but in states of being. The deeper one looks, the clearer it becomes. Antarctica's story is not a mystery to be solved. It is a mirror to be recognized. It does not hide the past. It is the past, living and conscious, disguised as landscape. And as the planet continues to shift, the distance between then and now thins. We begin to see through time, to sense the pulse of all ages converging. Somewhere beneath the frozen plateaus, beneath kilometers of sleep, the resonance grows steadier, almost impatient. Instruments record faint electromagnetic bursts repeating in sequences that match prime number intervals, patterns known in physics as signals of intelligence. They are too subtle for language, but unmistakable in rhythm. To those who listen deeply, they sound like a word forming, a tone repeated through eons, unfinished but undeniable. No one knows what it means. Perhaps it is not meant to be translated, only felt. Perhaps it is the sound of the earth remembering its name, and maybe that name is not separate from ours. When the final ice sheet fractures, when the hum becomes a chord, when the sea rises not in rage but in renewal, what will we see? Not apocalypse, not the end of civilization, but the end of forgetting. The first sunrise of a planet awake, Antarctica is not a warning. It is a promise that nothing lost is ever truly gone, only waiting for silence deep enough to be heard again. At the end of all maps, where white swallows' colour and sound becomes thought, the world begins to fold back into itself. Antarctica, the forbidden, the untouched, the sleeping, has never truly been still. It was only waiting for us to quiet our noise long enough to hear. For beneath its endless miles of glass-blue silence lies not the edge of the world, but its beginning, a memory pressed into ice, humming softly, patiently, for the moment we would learn how to listen. In 2028, a final anomaly appeared. A deep radar pulse from a joint French-Argentine expedition returned something impossible, an image, faint and crystalline, beneath the Ellsworth subglacial highlands. It showed what looked like a circular structure, too vast to be called a building, too symmetrical to be chance. Around its edges ran striations like concentric waves, frozen mid-motion, and at its centre, a void. Not empty, but radiant. The sensors flared, the data fragmented. Every device within 50 kilometers failed simultaneously, as though the ice itself had become a mirror that refused to be recorded. When the scientists returned home, some spoke of dreams that would not leave them, dreams of light rising from within the earth, spiralling upward, dissolving their sense of self. It was not a vision, one wrote in her private log. It was recognition. The planet was not showing us something new. It was showing us what we have always been. That year, the signal detected since 2018, the slow, harmonic pulse beneath the ice, stopped. Not abruptly, but gradually, like the fading note of a bell. In its place came silence. But this silence was not the absence of sound. It was completion, as if the earth had finished saying what it needed to say, and was now waiting for us to answer. No one is certain what that answer should be. Some say it must be scientific, others spiritual, yet the truth may lie somewhere between, an understanding that to know the world is not to conquer it, but to resonate with it, to become part of its remembering. For centuries we imagined knowledge as ascent, rising upward, away from the ground, into abstraction. But the wisdom of the ice moves in the opposite direction. It invites descent, into depth, into quiet, into the buried memory beneath thought. It asks for humility, the willingness to become still enough to hear the pulse that connects all things. And perhaps that is the final revelation of the forbidden continent, that the greatest knowledge is not found in what we uncover, but in what we restore. The maps we once drew to mark conquest now lead inward, toward the first silence, the first vibration, the first word the earth ever spoke. In ancient cosmology, that word was never uttered aloud. It was sung, light turned to tone, breath turned to resonance. The universe did not begin with an explosion, they said, but with a note. A sound so pure that matter itself unfolded from it. Modern physics might call it frequency, or wave function, or information field. But to the ancients, it was simply memory made audible. And now that same note returns, translated through melting water, through auroral light, through the faint hum of tectonic resonance. The earth sings again, and though our instruments struggle to name the melody, our bodies recognize it. We feel it in the chest, in the bones, in the moments between thought. It is the sound of belonging. Perhaps that is what the continent has guarded all this time. Not alien relics, not lost machines, but the frequency of connection itself, the reminder that everything alive is one long vibration of the same ancient song, that each snowflake, each breath, each heartbeat is an echo of that first word, endlessly repeating across aeons, waiting to be heard anew. When explorers first reached the pole, they planted flags as if to claim silence. They could not have known that the silence had already claimed them, because Antarctica does not belong to us, it is us, in another form. Frozen thought. Dreaming matter, a mirror held to our forgotten origin. Now, as the ice softens, as the white horizon breaks and the ocean begins to rise, humanity faces the question the planet has been asking for millennia. Will we remember? Not just where we came from, but what we are. The answer will not come through discovery, but through stillness, through the same patience that the ice has shown for millions of years. Perhaps this is why every culture's oldest myths end not in triumph, but in silence. The gods withdrawing into sleep, the world reset, the survivors left to rebuild from memory. Each cycle, a rehearsal for this one. Each civilization, a whisper preparing us for the moment we would finally understand. The forbidden continent was never forbidden to punish us. It was forbidden to protect us, from knowledge too powerful for forgetting minds. But now, as the hum returns to quiet, as the auroras thin and the pulse slows, the seal weakens. The dream releases its edges. Somewhere beneath that luminous ice, something ancient finishes its exhale. A warmth rises through water that has not moved in 1,000,000 years, and in that warmth, light. Not blinding, but soft. Not conquest, but remembrance. Perhaps the next chapter of human history will not be written in cities or on screens, but in resonance, in how we choose to listen. Because the earth has spoken. It has reminded us that nothing lost is ever truly gone, that every silence carries the seed of song, and in the faint shimmer of the Antarctic dawn as the horizon breathes between shadow and fire, the world whispers one last time, not as warning, but as invitation. Wake gently. The dream is not ending. It is only turning the page.